All right, folks. Welcome to the Liberty on the Land spaces and live stream happening at the same time. It's kind of cool. I got spaces happening on the phone here. I got a handy little stand. I don't have to touch it. And oh, and I got this microphone too, so that I can sound better in the YouTube world. How's everybody doing tonight? That lovely track that we started with was one of my most listened to jazz artists, kind of modern jazz artists, Stuart McCollum, guitar player. And that track, that album was called Distilled, and the track was called In Flight. And I love music like that. It's kind of, if you like sort of electronica music like Bonobo or Boards of Canada or things like that, you would like this artist. And that's contemporary jazz. It doesn't necessarily sound like Miles Davis kind of blue, you know, though that's all really good. I love Miles Davis and I love kind of blue, but a lot of contemporary stuff kind of goes out of the norm of what jazz is typically considered. But the thing that's true to it is the interesting harmonies, the interesting rhythms, um, and the improvisational element to the music, but also the care for dynamics. That's the thing that jazz music has that I find in, say, music that has rhythm sections. So that's a broad term, but basically, all rock and roll, everything with guitar, bass, drums, saxophones, horns in that based around a rhythm section of guitar, bass, drums, piano, or some kind of combination of that. That this music today, contemporary music, jazz music, just respects the dynamics, the musical dynamics. Whereas, you listen to a lot of metal music or whatnot, the drummers are it's just full throttle all the time. And I think there's a time and a place for music like that. I like that kind of music too. But one thing I just love about jazz so much is the care for space and quiet. Because music can be powerful when it's loud, and that's a good thing. But if it's loud all the time, it just makes you deaf. And myself as a, recovering rock and roll musician, or punk rocker, I should say, really, I have years of hearing damage that I probably didn't have to have because of just playing fucking loud music and listening to loud music all the time. And yeah. So anyways, I like to start these spaces off with a track. So people on YouTube, you might wonder, what the hell is he talking about? Talking about jazz. So I didn't play the intro track on YouTube because YouTube's copyright infringement thing is so hardcore that it would immediately just remove the stream. And so you can't play music. I mean, maybe if I really wanted to go to the effort to seek out licensing agreements with Stuart McCollum's publicist or whoever I talk to there, maybe it's possible, but it's not really turn and burn. It's a lot. It's a lot to do. Radio stations and things like that do it because they've had a long way of doing that for so long. And so anyways, we can't do that on YouTube. It's unfortunate, but we've got how do I tell how many people are in the space? I can't tell. Oh yeah, here I can. We got 14 people in the space right now. Smash the like, folks, share it, get people in. If this works out tonight, I'm just going to do this like this all the time, because why not? I can stack functions and I don't have to do two separate things and then, come in cold with another thing. I can just do it all at once. So this seems to be working. Let me know if you're down, if it sounds good, and if you're digging it. So right out of the gate, got a super chat here from Larry Moore. That came in right out of the gate. Larry, thank you for that one. All right, class, it looks like we're going to have to start without Curtis. Well, again, Larry, my apologies, and I appreciate people's time. And yes, we did start a little late because I was doing this for the first time. So I'm a one-man show up here. So that's how she goes. And so tonight I wanted to riff on some stuff. And kind of lately, I've just been using Twitter as a sounding board to figure out what things are, you know, percolating in people's interests in the call it the public lexicon. And so um, that's been kind of a fun thing to throw out there. Had an interesting conversation uh going on about EVs. You guys watching on YouTube, like about two years ago, 2 summers ago, I did a video on my Tesla, but it wasn't really about my Tesla at all. That was just to troll all of the Tesla haters out there. But no, the video was to talk about how EVs are a total boondoggle. And but here I am, a hypocrite driving one, and that's not really the case I was trying to make. What I was trying to show people is that electric vehicles, as great as they are for some people, for most people, they just don't make sense. And we've got this thing now with the Canadian government saying, and California did this actually during the time that I made that video. So California actually made all these same announcements that Canada just made. California made 2 years ago, and it has always been that way with Canada. As California goes, Canada goes a year or two later. With Canada, if it's a conservative government, whatever California does, uh, Canada will do 4 years later because they'll just wait till the next election because Canada's elections always just swing back and forth, liberal, conservative. Not always, but do much in the same way that the American politics do. But as California goes, it's either 4 years or 2 years, but it eventually happens in Canada. And so Canada put out recently this thing that, and you see that douchebag environmentalist liberal guy, Ligo, or I forget his name. Doesn't matter. He's just a meat puppet. um, we're going to have electric vehicles by 2035 and you won't be able to buy or sell petroleum vehicles. But it wasn't fully that clear. It was more, and I'm sure there's the devil's in the details as they always are with these kinds of things. But it's another demonstration of absolute delusion on the state of the government, in that just like we saw with the COVID policies and all the madness through the globalist administrative mechanism, these things just make no sense whatsoever. And and all you have to do is kind of just like put it through the litmus test. And I kind of did that in this thread, and I'll kind of share it with you guys and kind of riff on it a little bit further. But basically, when it comes, if the government's going to say something like this, I mean, this is really the point, even for me to even go through all the reasons why electric vehicles don't make sense for most people. And that means only as I say it does. There's no other meaning in there as electric vehicles are a total scam. That's not really the point. The point is just that the fact of the matter is, economically and practically, electric vehicles will no way be able to meet the needs of the average individual living in Canada, especially. You could make the case that in some places, at least in cities, that could be possible, and perhaps that's how it will actually be enforced, because that's where they get away with enforcement. It'd be difficult to get away with that level of enforcement in rural areas, because then people just create black markets, which is what happens in a free market. And money and commerce is just a river, and the government creates blocks in the river. And then what happens around the blockage, if you visualize watching a river and you see, say, a rock in the river, is that the velocity of the water around the rock increases because it has to move the same amount of mass in half the space. So the velocity increases. So thus happens in the economy, in a way, is that when government creates roadblocks and things like that, you create velocity and friction points in places that become opportunity zones. And so people just find ways around things. They always do. That's the beauty of, the innovation of humans and the world and the place that we live, is that we always find a way to create abundance. It's almost in our nature. I would actually say that it is in our nature to create and to find remedy to get to a path of least resistance, if you will. And you can think about money and the economy, or simply the energy that you spend as a reflection of that. And so the economy always finds a way. So going back to EVs, the point of it all really is that it's not about. There's a saying that the New World Order has. I forget where this one comes from specifically, but you'll hear guys like Patrick Moore or Alex Newman repeat it. It's that uh, the issue is not the issue. The issue is revolution. The issue is always revolution. So, case in point, the issue is not climate change, is it being an existential crisis that is going to um, that puts mankind at this greater collective risk. It's not that at all. It's whatever the issue needs to be. So the issue of the day could be climate change, or it could be COVID, or it could be any other thing. It could be George Floyd. It could be the Israel-Palestine issue. It could be anything to deliver the result of revolution. So issue is not the issue. The issue is always revolution. And so this kind of comes into the Hegelian dialectic in a way too. And even Karl Marx and Engels knew this, that there was this way to just always create revolution by clouding the issue. And so environmentalism, any of these issues, feminism, any of these issues, just pick your issue. It has been compromised in some way. And so it's not to say that every issue doesn't have its legit merits. It's certainly that is not the case at all. There's absolutely unequivocally legitimate environmental considerations, right? So there's this whole false dichotomy that's created with the narrative of climate change, is that if you say that no, carbon dioxide is not an existential threat to humankind, not at all. In fact, on the contrary, maybe. But uh, it so that is the issue with that issue, is that it is so clouded, because it's like, well, what are we talking about specifically? So if you dive deeper into environmental issues, you'll find that there's many legitimate environmental issues, but they're specific, right? And that's a that's good. I'm an environmentalist when it comes to that, but I'm not a globalist environmentalist that says that carbon emissions are the sole cause for climate change, which nobody has ever been able to prove. All they do is make up models of predictions that never come true, right? I mean, just pick your issue. Go back so far. But anyways, going back to the EV thing and the scam that this is it's all about just making you not drive. Because when you look at the legislation that they want to put forward and how it's going to be implemented, ultimately what it's going to do is, just like any form of regulation in the market, is it creates winners and losers. It just picks favorites. And so there'll be people who will comply and they'll go along with it, and there'll be people who won't. And then there'll be people who go into a black market. And so there'll be kind of a mixed bag of players in there, but ultimately it'll reduce cars on the road. And that is the point, right? And all these globalist environmentalists, they talk about that explicitly in many different documents. Whether you look at Johns Hopkins documents, WHO, UN documents, Rockefeller Foundation. I mean, these guys, World Economic Forum, pick your poison, you know. They all talk about this. Reducing cars is the goal. And so, but ultimately above that, reducing your freedom is the goal. But you need to comply along the whole way. That's the beauty of it. That's why I always sort of promote this idea that we don't have to engage in this battle of free will against the New World Order. We just have to respectfully and in honor walk away. And that's a very loaded thing that I'm saying. It's super, super loaded. And I'm only saying so much because on these public platforms, sometimes there's no benefit to going too deep too quick, because there's people tuning in who just won't get it. And that's what I have found has been one of the biggest things in my journey of learning about the law and learning about the way things actually are and work, is that most people aren't ready for it. And then once they get a little taste of what it is, don't want it because they're too scared. They're too scared to take responsibility. So they don't want to go all the way. I call it going to the gates. And only you can take yourself to the gates. I can't take you there. I can show you the way in part, but I can't take you there. I can't even hold your hand in the walkway. You know, you're on your own. And so that's how it works. And that's kind of a cool thing in a way. It's kind of it's I find it inspiring because then it absolves all my fear of all of it. because I've seen that. I have literally seen that. And perhaps, I'm thinking about doing some of these private events over the summer. Perhaps um, people will be able to come and spend some time with me, and I'd be willing to share these stories a bit more. But there's no upside to me to share those stories in this kind of platform. But regardless, going back to the EV thing, I keep going in these side rails. Maybe that's why you folks listen to my rants or my mumblings here. Smash the like if you know what I'm talking about and if you agree. And I can see that on YouTube. On Twitter, it's a little harder to see, but I am paying attention to it a little bit, folks. Uh, but it's like a microphone here, basically. But going back to the EVs, they want to make everybody drive an EV by 2035. And so, as a guy who's driven an EV for 5.5 years, and I like it, I like my car. But I will tell you that most people, it just doesn't suit their context. And there's some people that are just hardcore Elon Musk haters, and thus they think that you have to have an opinion on him in order to drive their car. Whereas, if you ask the average person if they have an opinion on the CEO of the car they drive, most people would say, I have no idea what you're talking about. But people choose to have that opinion when it comes to Elon Musk. Needless to say, I do like the car. I think they're very well made. Their warranty system is pretty bang up. It's better than any other vehicle I've ever driven, and I've mostly driven Toyotas new, but Tesla's is better than Toyotas. And yeah, so it's pretty good. But so there's a number of things. There's 9 things why EVs suck for the average person. First thing is, if you live in Canada, it's cold here, and lithium ion batteries don't like cold. So this is where I'm going to go through these things here, and I don't think we'll spend too much time on it because I want to riff on some other stuff that's going to be fun. But we're in it for a couple hours here, so and we'll have time to take some calls too. And the cool thing about this on the YouTube end, you guys, you'll be able to hear the callers through my phone, and so that'll be kind of fun. And we'll see how that goes. And of course, I'll pay attention for you guys' super chats here. But it's hard to keep up with the chat and look at this and look at these things. And so I'll do my best. I'm gonna have a little sip of water. But Canada's cold, and lithium ion batteries drain. If I leave my car outside and and there's varying degrees of it, certainly. If it's 0 or around freezing, it'll drain probably 5 to 10 kilometers of range charge in a night just sitting outside. So you really, if you don't want to just constantly lose your power, you need to park your car in a heated garage. And so that car is in here, and it's heated. I got my wood fire going in here. Um, or if you don't have that, when I lived in Kelowna, I didn't have a heated garage. I had a covered carport area that was gated and stuff. I had a door. But I would plug the Tesla in overnight. So you would just be spending power. So that's not economical for the average person. Another thing is the energy grid, right? The energy grid, there's articles. I'm sharing them on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter at OffGridStone. There's 288 people here. I doubt all you guys are following me there, because if you were, you'd probably be listening in spaces. But you might like the YouTube stuff too, because it's video. Twitter's going to have that pretty soon, though, actually, on these spaces. It'll be video as well. But yeah, so what was I going to say there? Okay, so yeah, going on about the cars. So um, yeah, it's cold. It's cold. And so, anyways, I had to keep it plugged in. So, how economical is it with this green economy that now you're just going to have the grid burn more power, and the grid's already shutting down? I've been sharing articles on it. In the video I posted about this 2 years ago, um, I shared article links to in California talking about how the grid's maxing out and they're having blackouts all the time. So, but again, they know that, and that's why they're doing it. And that's the point. The blackouts are the point, right? That's so the pursuit of this green energy boondoggle is just going to result in less freedom, less services available, things more expensive and regulated, and far less of a chance that that younger people coming up are even going to have a vehicle. And that's a big thing, because if you think about the Canadian and American way of life, the North American way of life, the car is a significant symbol of freedom. Significant. I mean, you could almost make the case that it was the backbone of American pop culture for many, many decades. and still is in so many different ways. But that's being phased out because they want you to have this new idea of, you know, if you're living in the city, you're stacked, packed in a really tight apartment, but you got cool community things going on and you the city and there's culture and that's cool. And so, you know, that's all hip and liberal. Or if you're a hip liberal who's living in the country, they got you stacked and packed in a tiny house. Right? But ultimately, it's about reducing your freedoms. You know, the location can vary, but tiny house thing, I could do a whole other rant on that. That's totally a psyop. Not that there's anything wrong with tiny houses, because I think it's actually in some ways, just like with EVs, there's good and bad, and there's some things that are practical about it, and there's other things that just aren't. But you know, raising a family in a tiny house is madness. I couldn't. I mean, I feel like I'm in a tiny house with my cabin, and I feel like going nuts. Especially when my kids are fighting and stuff. But anyways, all of these things are just meant to reduce your quality of life and also reduce you. Because if they just keep producing incrementally like a slow boiling frog in water, keep reducing your quality of life, people won't reproduce as much. Also, I mean, all the chemicals that they put in the food and the shots and the water, you know, that just sterilize people too. I mean, people having less and less kids. That is massive concern. Um, but maybe not, because maybe the New World Order and that whole thing, the 5G smart city, all that hack, track, stack to packed, maybe that is a remedy for some people who just don't want to own their life. You know, they don't want to own their life. I know people who play those geocaching games, you know, those geocaching games like Pokemon Go, and you walk around with your phone and you go get things. I know people that spend hours who are adults who play those games 20 hours a week. They're already almost plugged into the matrix. They're almost already there, just in a complete virtual reality. And so a lot of people in the world will opt to live with less and accept a significantly reduced quality of life with the illusion of freedom and the illusion of, I don't know, a certain level of hedonism as well and instant gratification. And then that'll be fine for them. And so, you know, it's it's madness. Going back to EVs, I mean, the charging infrastructure. Um, if they want everybody, just think about everybody you know who has a car. How many of those people who have a car have their own home with their own place to park it? Seriously, ask yourself that question. If the answer is very few, it could mean a couple of things. One, that could be the circle that you're in, and maybe that's a good thing. But if it's not, it could mean that, yeah, a lot of people don't have a place to park the vehicle, and then EVs are a complete waste of time. If you can't charge at home and trickle charge it, now you're paying a lot more to charge it because, oh, this is funny. It's playing ads in my live stream. Oh, that's weird. Well, another reason to be on Spaces. Um, but if you don't have a place to charge it, that car is just going to diminish constantly, especially in the winter. So that's just not practical for most Canadians. And how practical is it for most people who have vehicles to have a place to park it? And so then if that's the case, you're charging it at the charger, which means you got to sit in your car and do nothing. Or if you're fortunate enough to like live near a place to charge, you can go plug it in there, and then come back and get your car when it's ready. But most people can't do that. So that's just another complete delusion that the Canadian government, or in the California government for that matter, think will be a reasonable ask for the average person. There's just no way in hell. The time is another thing too, right? To charge the car is just ridiculous. It takes time. It's not as convenient as gasoline. However, that's why if you have a place to park it at home, it solves that problem right out of the gate, especially if you're mostly just a daily commuter. And so you're driving to and from your home on a daily basis, and you're not on the road all the time. If you're on the road all the time, Tesla is not very practical. It can be in some ways. You know, when my family was traveling, we traveled through 41 US states in the US in that Tesla. And so most of the continental US we've driven through in that car. And honestly, the charging is not a big deal. But to the charging, Uh, a lot's changed with Tesla and EVs in general in the last 5 years. A lot, especially with Teslas, because there's so many more on the road, and you actually have to wait at charging stations. So that's not convenient. That's a huge waste of time because you charging have to wait. If I drive down to say 10% or something like that, which is a reasonable thing to drive down to, and I want to go and plug in to get to 80 because it's faster to get to 80 than to wait the extra 20 minutes to get the last 20%. You get to 80 in sometimes 20 minutes. And but then you got to wait 20 minutes. So now you're 40 minutes. It's just not practical. And so that's a big problem there. But again, if your life is suited to that, as mine is, I've got a warm place to plug the car. I'm off grid and I need a dump load. So I have so much excess solar for 10 months of the year that it's very economical for me to dump that into that car because it meets 99% of our commuting needs to go into town and back. The odd time we do a trip and I might have to charge somewhere, but for a 400-kilometer trip, it might only cost me $5 in extra charging, really. So, again, if your lifestyle works for it, it's great. It's great. Um, and then we've got, EV, the reality, and I don't drive an EV because of the environmental thing. I'm not delusional about climate change. I used to be. I like EVs for a lot of the other reasons. I like the quiet. I like the very little maintenance as far as changing oil and brakes and stuff like that. I like that. Um, I like the instant acceleration, blah blah blah. I like things about them, but they're not environmentally friendly. They're oil and gas is needed the entire way through the production line of EVs. 100% from well, first of all, none of the construction on site could happen without oil and gas. Like that's the biggest thing right there. So the entire investment to bring all the raw materials, do all the construction, let alone doing mining of the lithium ion, every single thing along that chain of production to deliver EVs needs oil and gas. So that's just a reality. Whether you like it or not, it doesn't matter. It's just the reality. So that's another delusion is that the government is saying we're going to shut this whole sector of transport down in the economy in the name of not using fossil fuels and saving the earth, um, is just physically not possible. How likely is it that they're going to completely rebuild the supply chain for an entire, like, servicing the EV industry is servicing automotive in general. It's not there isn't a whole line of a fleet of trucks and manufacturing on all the other parts that you don't manufacture at the plant. There isn't a whole supply chain of those things built up running electric vehicles. Right? Like, are you kidding me? How many truckers do you know who drive the Tesla semi truck? None. None. Not to say that that can't change, but I don't see electric skid steers and excavators and front end loaders and big rock movers or just big mining equipment and those massive dump trucks they have. I don't see any of that as EVs. So excuse me, we have a little bit of a cold and a little bit stuffed up in the nose. I might have to take a break to blow my nose at some point. But you don't see any of that. And so it's delusional to think that, well, one, the industry could be powered by electric vehicles, and two, that the industry is going to change to even get close to it in any of the near future. 2035, not even close. Not even close. Um, the another thing about EVs too is the repair conundrum, and Tesla definitely has this the best, but just in that their repairs, at least from my experience, and I live very rurally, but still can access their whole network of repairs very easily. Easier than Toyota, I might say, because I have both a Toyota and a Tesla. But that there is that with a lot of these other ones. The ones that that are coming out, say Nissan and stuff like that, where you have a Nissan dealership, they're probably getting better at it too. But a lot of these things are super specialized. And that's a thing for electric stuff in general, though, which is the biggest fault point with anything electric. And I use a lot of electric tools. I use a lot of electric equipment now, and I like it. But Sometimes these things are being made overcomplicated, which means that they're impossible to repair yourself, which sucks because now um, you don't have the thing you want. Like I bought this electric snowblower, a Toro. It's called the Toro, and I've loved using it. It's been really convenient. The thing just died on me, just died, and I have no idea what it was. If it was gas, I would check the carb. I would, check the gas, check the oil, check the classic things that you check when there's an engine, a Honda, and Honda engines are so reliable. But when there's something like that happens, you kind of have a protocol, things you know what to do. This electric snowblower, I didn't even know what the hell to do. It just went beep, 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 beep. It was like R2D2 dying. It was pathetic. I was so bummed because I was stoked on this thing at first. I was like, oh, this thing looks kind of sweet because it's the same as the gas one, all the same parts except the motor is electric. I was like, okay, that seems like a good idea. Hopefully, I can get down with that. But there was some features in it right away that I was kind of like, why does it have that? It has this key that you turn. Like, what pointless thing? You don't need that with an electric thing. You don't have to turn on an engine, get it going, but you do it. It's kind of stupid. But anyways, thing died, and I don't know what the hell to do. So I got to take the thing back, and it's under warranty, and I'm sure they'll figure it out. But that's a case in point example of the electric conundrum. Um, you know, I don't really need to go on about this anymore. It's probably not that interesting, but some people commented on hydrogen. But basically, in summary, um, EVs are great for some people, but for most people, they're just not practical. I would say for people living in cities, if their infrastructure is there provided for it, and most likely what that's going to look like is that you don't own the car, right? Because that's what they want. They want you to own nothing to be happy. So you'll see EVs implemented in cities. They'll either be driving you around, like the Tesla can literally like legitly drive you. Like the full self-driving is legit. It works like crazy. It can drive my driveway. Because of regulations, I have to squeeze the steering wheel every minute or whatever it is. But it can do it. And it's crazy. So the technology is there. It will be driving and chauffeuring people around in the cities, but it'll mean like, yeah, everybody's driving EVs, but nobody owns them, right? And so that is ultimately the point, is they just want less cars on the road because it's about less freedom for you and more freedom for them. And so that's really what it comes down to with EVs. It's no, I'm not selling the Mini X. You know what? I, yeah, somebody's like, "Are you going to sell the Mini X?" No, I don't think so. I have it listed. I'm going to take it down because it's just not realistic to sell. But yeah, just checking in on the space here. What have we got? See, I'm getting kind of people in the space can't see this, but on YouTube, I'm I'm kind of nearsighted now, which is actually good because I've always had to wear glasses for everything, reading, looking afar. Now I don't need glasses for looking up at things close. So I kind of think it's a good thing. But I'm just looking at the space here. We got 28 people in the space. And yeah, I'm not gonna have call-ins just yet. I'm just gonna kind of keep going on stuff and see. I'm gonna take a look at the chat here. And I can't, oh, there's a chat in spaces too here. Let's see. Stevie E says he's watching online. Right on. How's it going in the spaces? Can you guys comment or whatever? Let me know how it's sounding. And did you like that opening track? That Stuart McCollum track? That album is amazing. I'll show you guys the for those who can on YouTube. That's that album. Stuart McCollum. Really cool ensemble too. He's got a harp player that comes in for a number of tracks. It's like a rhythm section, bass, drums, guitar. The guy he plays a lot of effects, so he really fills out the space. And then there's some horns. He's got strings on some tracks. It's a beautiful album. Just beautiful. Uh yeah. So the other thing I wanted to riff on too is population. And I've talked about this in some of the I've talked about this on the stream, not the space, before. And I wanted to show, and I show it too. If folks in the space haven't seen it yet, I shared. You go into my profile and you can see a map I shared, and it's a population density map. It actually looks just like a map of it looks just like a map of at the night sky when you see those satellite images of the night sky and you see where the light is in the country. And this is a population map. And basically, what this represents is population density per capita. So whatever it is per probably it's per square mile or per square kilometer. But you can see the highlighted areas, the dense areas are just simply where there's more people. And the easiest observation you can make um, when you look at that map in North America is that there's far less people out west than there is out east, and it almost divides right down the Mississippi from the center of the U.S. going into well, not quite. It's actually a little bit. It's a bit further west than the Mississippi, but it's close. But you notice that, and this is a big thing when assessing risk. You know, when you're thinking about where you want to be when the shit goes down. You know, as the old Cypress Hill song goes, when the shit goes down, you better be ready. When the shit goes down, um, where do you want to be? And why do you want to be there? And so I want to riff on this a little bit because there's some other things that are kind of interesting to talk about because I think I like to point out elephants in the room. Some people might say, "Hey, Curtis, why are you?" Because I tell people all the time that the Southeast is the nicest place to live in the United States, and one of the best states to buy property in right now is Kentucky. People say, "Well, why are you saying that? If you're saying that," it's like, well, I don't have any emotion on the facts. I just bring the facts. And I try to as best as I can. And if I'm wrong on the facts, you let me know. So I just try to bring the facts without emotion and just without bias and just present them and then let you decide. But when I talk about population, you go, okay, well, when things get bad, one of the things that could affect you the most is people. But on the flip side, when things get good, one of the things that can affect you the most is people. So people are a symmetrical risk in a way. It's not asymmetrical, right? It's not it can be the same on both sides potentially, right? It's just like it's like saying water is a risk, but it's also an asset, right? Because water can be a risk because you could live in a flood zone, but you need to drink water. So water is also an asset because you need it to live. And one thing that's really interesting about when you look at a population density map, and let me show it to you again here on YouTube, is that what you'll also notice is that there is a direct correlation. And you can go really esoteric on this one. This would be some gravy here. Is you can is that human beings concentrate in areas where there's more water. And then you ask the question, well, what's this whole thing about the economy and water and the government and water? Like, if you ever read if you read the definition of Canada in the Interpretations Act of Canada, it defines Canada as, for greater certainty, Canada is the internal and territorial waters within the landmass known as Canada in brackets. That's what it says. So that's kind of an interesting rabbit hole. But needless to say, there's all these correlations to water, you know, and really fundamentally what it comes down to is that we need water to live. So when you look at this map of the US and you look at that population density map, it's basically the whole eastern seaboard is where everybody lives. But check this out. I want to share another map with you. And we're going to look at a climate zone map in under the Köppen-Geiger, which is a map that shows the climate regions of the world. And so I'm just going to zoom out here and get all that off there and zoom out here and show you something really trippy. That when you look at the climate zone map, let me share my screen here. Again, my apologies while I blumble around this. And actually, the climate zone map Actually, you know what? Let's look at that right now, but I'll show you something else. So see this green region here. This, what we're really talking about is this, but this is all temperate because even in these boreal regions here of North America, it's still a lot more temperate. The amount of rainfall that they get in Vermont and Quebec and Ontario is significantly more than we get out on the western side, the western seaboard of North America. But check this out. This map even actually shows it better. So you can correlate directly green areas with where people dwell. Why is that? It's because it's easier to live in areas where there's water. Thus, more activity happens, economic activity happens. People congregate more in those areas because living conditions are easier. And so that's what's kind of interesting. On because you can say, okay, you can just assess risk and say there's more people on the eastern seaboard of the United States and Canada. Unequivocally, it's significant. It's probably 80% of the population of both those countries exists from that approximate point of the Mississippi River east. And then if you go straight west, you'll see concentrations of populations along the California coast all the way up to Vancouver, Lower Mainland, basically all through Oregon and Washington, that strip, that fertile strip along and again, I'll just show it here on Google Earth again, that fertile strip directly correlates. Here, maybe I can just share. Oh yeah, let's do this. Let's share the screen. Never mind. I'm just gonna do this. Too complicated for me. Again, that green strip right there. So green areas here, population density, green areas here, population density. Seems kind of simple. People amalgamate or concentrate in areas that are easy to live in. So what does that mean? It means that if you are a little bit more tough in some ways, at least in your ability to tolerate environmental conditions that are less easy to live in than on the eastern seaboard, you can live with a lot more freedom in a lot of ways. But with those freedoms comes certain compromises. So as I was saying, when from the prepper standpoint, this is what the position I've taken on this for years has been, generally speaking, if you're concerned about some kind of economic collapse or the system falling apart, Cloward and Piven, whatever it's going to be, probably all those things, it's going to fall apart for a variety of many reasons. You could say that you could have significant less risk as far as security in an area of less population. However, on the flip side, you could also make the case that you also have less resources available. So you have, in both ways, human resources and environmental resources, because in a concentrated fertile area, you have a concentration of environmental resources, right? Water, vegetation, soil, um, uh, resources like trees, lumber, softwood lumber, hardwood lumber. British Columbia is full of it, but is less on the other things. So it comes with opportunities and risks, essentially. And so it's not necessarily across the board, boom, you solve all your problems by not being around people. You do in some ways, in some situations, but in others, you could also present challenges because it could be a challenge if we run into some kind of scenario um, where there's just not stuff available and we have to just hunker down. Depending on how sort of unrested society is and how much civil unrest we have, so to speak, um, it could just be not worth taking the risk to get things. And so you just have to hunker down. So I could almost see a sort of, if you could imagine, not a Mad Max world, but imagine sort of a post-apocalyptic scenario where, no, it's not even post-apocalyptic. It's just like there's no money, manufacturing's not running, everything's shut down. There's all kinds of propaganda going on. You don't know what's going on. Kind of like this that last movie, that Leave the World Behind, that Obama little predictive programming thing. Um, but maybe without the war stuff, just what the hell's going on? Uncertainty. Internet's not working. Um, Highways are gridlocked. I don't want to go into town, you know. Um, in areas where there's higher concentrations of people, there's more velocity in relationships. So you know more people, there's more people around you, you have more neighbors, you have an ear to the ground a little bit more. So that could be a good and a bad thing. Whereas on the flip side, on the Western side, where there's just less stuff, is you just don't know. And that could be where I'm at, because I'm on that Western side where there's very, very little population per square mile. Like significantly, it's probably 1,000 times less than, say, you know, Eastern Texas. Um, and so it might be a scenario where when the lights go out, well, I don't even know because I got an off-grid system. And so I have power, I have heat, I have food, I've got the capacity to grow food, I've got all this stuff. But I go down to the highway and I drive down for, say, a few kilometers and I go, well, it's gridlocked. And it looks like there's a lot of people here pissed off. I'm just going to turn around and go back home and I'm just going to wait. But you could not know. You could go a long time with not knowing. So I don't know. It's kind of an interesting scenario to kind of like just think on of, you know, what could happen? How could it all go? But it isn't necessarily cut and dry that it's risk or less risk. You know, I think it could be cut and dry when it comes to urban populations. Like to live in Memphis, Tennessee, when the shit goes down, I would say most likely you're fucked. Like you better get out of that place quickly, because there's a lot of desperate people there who are violent and will take what's yours very quickly. Whereas, you know, you go to a place that's maybe a little bit less of a, you know, you know, shithole city. You might be okay. You know, you go to the other side of Nashville, and it might be better experience. You know, could be even just thinking. I don't know, what are some really conservative towns in the U.S. Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. You know, you could do all right in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, I'm sure, but Atlanta, Georgia, no. You don't want to be in Atlanta, Georgia, but you could be in some part of Georgia that's really rural and off the beaten path, and you could be okay. At the same time, when you just think about condition, and this is why I've always said for so long, being rural in a cold climate, if you're assessing human risk, um, being in a rural cold climate is one of the best you can have, because if you have the ability just to wait it out and you've got the resources to wait it out, the conditions surrounding you are your best defense. Because in a place like Atlanta, Georgia, you know, you look at the US map and, you know, the whole southeastern seaboard, you know, many parts of, you know, call it from Western Texas up into Arkansas, over to southern Illinois, southern Indiana, southern Ohio, all through Kentucky, all the way through Pennsylvania towards Washington, D.C., and then all the way down the coast and then back over through Louisiana. You would be able to survive for a very long time if just as far as physically being able to survive, because there's a lot of resources around. You could steal things. It could be chaos, right? It could be chaos, and you wouldn't want to be visible. Like you wouldn't want to be out in the cities in the riots, looting. You don't want to be there. But physically, you could survive a lot because you don't suffer from exposure. So you know, your main threats are security of your person, security of, you know, of your body and your family or whatever, water, food, shelter if you need it. But in those climates, you can survive for a long time without shelter because they're fairly warm. Just think about, you know, pretty much anywhere along the South Coast, from Texas, uh, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, through Florida, all the way up the East Coast, South Carolina, North Carolina. You could survive along in those climates for a very long time without exposure. And so that's huge. But we're out west. in the high elevation boreal and semi-arid steppe climates, forget about it. There's no way you wouldn't survive a day in the winter. Uh, and it'd be hard to get through a night if you were just traveling by foot. I mean, I think about the winter and the conditions that we live in here. We get down to minus 30 Celsius, which is what's that in Fahrenheit? It's cold. It's maybe minus 20 or something like that. Um, with tons of snow on the ground. So you can only travel by road. You can't travel through the bush. In Georgia and all those places, you can travel through the bush forever. So you could be running into traps and ambushes anywhere. But up here, you can't even tread through the bush because there's 3 feet of settled snow on the ground. You can't walk through that unless you're prepared and you got snowshoes and the gear and the equipment to get through a night. And so that's what I like about the cold climates, though it does also increase your risk of resources are harder to get. The cool thing about it though is that there's sort of a there's a magical abundance in the earth, I believe, and I believe the New World Order don't want us to realize that. But there's a magical abundance in the earth, and this is something somewhat empowering about living out west is that the big difference between living out west and living out east is water. That's the biggest difference. There's other climate, soil, variable risks for sure, and a lot of those actually are all hinged on water. They all intersect with water. Is that you can physically change the climate of a place with water. With no water or water, you can physically change the climate of a place because water allows vegetation. And then vegetation brings in life, brings in, symbiotic relationships in nature. It creates a level of evaporation difference from the sky to the ground. It can create clouds. You look at in the jungle areas of Africa. You can see it. You watch nature documentaries. What I'm saying is nothing new, but you can see the forests perspire, and it's part of that hydrologic cycle, and it's amazing. So you can actually change the climate, and you can see throughout history that the places that were some of the most fertile areas are now deserts, right? And go to the Middle East, and that's certainly the case. So you can change the climate, but it's not just pumping carbon in the atmosphere that's changing the climate. That's just a BS boondoggle. But again, going back to what's enabling about the idea of water is that the earth has got water in it everywhere. I'm telling you guys, I I really, really believe there's an infinite abundance of water in the earth. I actually believe, and this will sound kind of crazy because I know some people go, prove it. Everything's scarce, everything's scarcity. Is that the earth has an infinite amount of oil, petroleum, because petroleum is something more than what we think it is and what we've been told. It's not dinosaur juice. It's something else in the earth that's created. Some of these, I've been in the peak oil movement or peak oil space for years. I got to meet Richard Heinberg down in Santa Rosa, California. He was the guy who wrote the book Peak Everything and Peak, the seminal book Peak Oil. The globalists, environmentalists love these guys' work. And I don't necessarily think that they were in on any conspiracy. They're just compartmentalized. But all the shit that these guys predicted was wrong. None of it came true. All this peak stuff is all BS. There's these oil wells just keep going, and water is the same thing. You look into what's called primary water, and you'll find a geologist. I forget his name, but his work is easy to find. Just do some Google searches, even you'll find it. Um, these geologists found that you could drill deep water wells, sometimes 2,000 meters deep. So 2 kilometers deep. No, 2,000 feet. Sorry, not 2 kilometers, 2,000 feet deep. And they would tap into these aquifers with 100 or 1,000 GPM and just an infinite amount of water coming out. And, there's some interesting anomalies about water. I've even experienced it myself on this property is that we're in this boreal, high elevation, dry climate. Wet winters, cold spring, summer, and fall. No, sorry, not cold, dry spring, summer, and fall, but wet winters. We have, 2 weeks to a 4-week period of rain in June, but that's it. It's dry here. And all of my neighbors in the valley below me have wells that are almost twice the depth of mine that pump at a fifth of the gallons per minute rate than mine do. Yet I'm on a mountain and my well is shallower and it produces 5 times or more water gallons per minute. How's that make sense if you think about what you've been taught about the hydrologic cycle? How does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. But, before I drilled this well, I talked to a bunch of different guys that had been drilling wells for a long time. I'm always the kind of guy that asks questions. And I talked to a dozen different water dowsers and witchers and well drillers, and all of them said they never hit dusters. The basic rule of thumb is if you drill deep enough, you'll hit water. Pretty much guarantee every time. Only one guy I talked to out of these guys said that in his career, out of 30 years, all these guys have been doing it for 30 years. Only one of them said they hit a duster in their entire career, and they just went 10 feet over and drilled another one and hit water. So what is that, right? Well, I don't know what it is. And I won't even try to explain what I think it is, because there's more to it than I can probably comprehend. But what I can easily observe is that just like everything in the world, there's this matrix layer of bullshit that they want you to get into this level of bullshit so that you get into this reduced or compartmentalized or limiting belief way of thinking to hide you from your true potential. And I really, really believe that true potential that we have of limitless abundance and the ability to create not only exists within our own physical, spiritual, and mental capacity, but it also exists within the place that we exist, that it's all there. Everything is there. When you look at the Bible and look at what it says about men having dominion, it's easy to think about that and follow it to its logical conclusion in a negative way, to say, yeah, this whole idea of dominion and conquering everything and the old way, call it. Yeah, that's not the dominion I'm talking about. I think the dominion I'm talking about is to be a steward of the place that we live, and to create more life. Be fruitful and multiply, as they say in the Bible. And I think, the New World Order, through all these environmentalist policies, all this technocracy, all this stuff, really what they want you to do is not see that. They want you to make sure that you don't realize your true potential, and that you just get in that box and put on that dunce cap and just do whatever the hell they tell you to do. And usually that involves signing up for a little program called the Rockefeller Payment Program, where basically you pay for your entire life to poison yourself and make yourself sick and just keep yourself just alive so you can pay the taxes, sign up for all the bullshit liability insurance and all the BS things that they got for you. And then at the end of your life, when you go to die, they even want that. They want your mortality, and they want you doped up so you don't even know you're alive. And when you die, you didn't even realize it all happened. That's what they want. That's their plan for you. The beauty is, though, the really empowering thing about it, I believe, is that they only want willing participants and true believers. They don't want most of us. Most of us listening to this right now, they don't want us. And they're willing to let us go. But you can't play a political game. This is my opinion. This is what I truly believe, is that if you play a political game, they will play a political game with you, and they will railroad you. And so that's where this whole thing of it's a spectrum. Let's call it a spectrum. I don't want to say it's a dichotomy. I don't want to say it's polar opposites, but it's a spectrum of ways that you can go through about this. And, I've talked about what is the government, what is the state, and most people, they go, oh, well, there's the federal government, the provincial government, or the state government, and there's the municipalities or the counties and whatever. But no, what there is there is all that. That's all legit. But above that, you have three ways to interact with the state. So there's different branches of government too. Like there's the executive and there's the Senate, and there's all these. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about the ways that you can interact with the state, there's three ways I've identified. And I'm actually curious if anybody has any other thoughts for me on this one, let me know. I'm curious because this is how I've thought about it is that there's politics, there's administration, and then there's law. Those are three capacities, if you will, that the state exists as I've identified it. So there's the politics, which is just the rhetoric, the political careers, the media spin on the whole thing, the name calling in the House of Commons, all the bullshit, just all the BS that doesn't do anything. It's just rhetoric. It's entertainment, really. It's just like watching a football game. There's the politics. But the politics can get really dirty too because they talk shit, right? And they talk shit publicly. The politics is public. It's all public. Then there's administrative. So then there's all the bureaucrats, all the bureaus, all this the pencil pushers, all just the people that work in the government that do the boring jobs that they hate, that the only reason they do them is so they get a pension one day and then they can just sit around and do nothing. And so that's the administration. And when you interact with the state, you're going to interact with the administration if you're doing anything in the legal. But then there's the law, which is the written word of the government. And so it is the paper world. Now you need the law to interact with the administration, and sometimes the politics also affects the administration. As you see, ministers are appointed, blah blah blah, and of course the politics can also affect the law because they can bring a bill to the House of Commons or the Senate, and then they can agree or not agree or vote it in or whatever, and then they can change the law. So all these things intersect. But when you play a political game, which is to engage in the rhetoric and the bullshit, basically, in my opinion, which does nothing, you take the highest risk because it's public and you'll either end up on one side of the narrative. For the most part, of course, an infinite amount of things can happen. And so I can't cover all those possibilities in one live stream, but you get what I mean. When you interact on the legal side, which is your gateway into the administration, you're not playing a public game. You're having a private conversation. Now, not in the same way that you are when we talk about capacity, a private capacity and a public capacity. To some degree, you are, but that's not totally what I mean by that. It's just you're just having a private conversation, right? Letters, phone calls, emails, whatever they could be. You're engaging in that conversation. And what is amazing, what I've learned with my interactions with the state, is that when you engage on a legal standing ground, strictly in the box, as the system is set up for us within all the codes and ordinances and statutes and remedies and everything there, you get a completely different experience, especially when you do it in honor. And so when you play this game of, fuck you, I don't want you to do this, I don't want to pay taxes, and you play this political game, which is to just get into the rhetoric, they'll railroad you because then they'll make an example of you. And to make an example of you is actually better than to just railroad you. To make an example of you and railroad you is a win-win for them. So they'll definitely take that road. But if you're not playing that game, I believe they're not going to pursue that. Now, that's just been my experience. So you take it for what it's worth. But this is where there is a way out for a lot of people. And there's what that looks like for you. It is as complicated and nuanced as you are as an individual. But what a question that I always ask myself is, okay, I want a certain level of freedom on something. What am I willing to do to get that? What amount of responsibility am I willing to get that? And then what does it look like? And is it worth it at the end? You get a lot of these guys, the old school free man guys, that do the drive without a driver's license and all that stuff. And that's all legit. You can do all that stuff. But the problem is that every time a cop pulls you over, you have to have an minimum hour-long conversation with that cop. And then he's going to call and this is if you know what you're doing. Most people don't know what they're doing with it, but I know guys that do. And I've witnessed it with my own eyes. I've seen it. It's legit. People all over the US and Canada and probably the UK do this. You can drive without a driver's license because the whole thing with insurance and drivers is a total racket. It's a total boondoggle. And you don't have to volunteer to do any of it. But you do have to weigh out the consequences of your time and say at the end of the day, I got two kids, I got a wife, we got places to go, we got things to do. And some cop pulls me over and I want to play this free man name game with him for an hour. And my kid's crying in the back. Now they're hungry. We don't have any a lunch. We need to go. I'm in trouble. Is it worth it? Because what does car insurance and registration, all that cost? It doesn't cost that much. Now, that could change, right? And if it does, that's where these kinds of remedies are going to become more important and perhaps absolutely necessary. Could get to a point. I dreamt about this or thought about this during COVID. Is that maybe it'll get to a point where intentional communities are going to have to travel by convoy because you won't want to go out on the roads because the road pirates, whether they're the state road pirates or the um, Mad Max World road pirates, are going to be looking for resources. So you're gonna have to travel in a convoy to make sure that you get to point A or point B safely. And that could possibly happen, but we're not there yet. So I look at what are the benefits? What are the costs and benefits of doing such thing? So that's what I would say to that. Folks, I'm going to break for just a minute. I'm going to take a whiz. And I think what I'll do is maybe I can play a song. Maybe I can multitask enough to cue this up while I keep riffing a bit, and then I can play it on on the spaces here. I'll have to just mute it on the YouTube, but you guys won't hear anything if I was going to take a pee anyways. Um you wouldn't hear me taking a pee. So, you know, another reason if people want to go over onto spaces. Let's see, does that play there? Is it connected? Oh yeah, right on. Okay. Um I've really been getting into I go all over with music, and lately I've been kind of going down memory lane. I was in Kelowna. Oh, I have a thing I want to tell you guys about too. It's a private event that I'm speaking at on New Year's and it's free. Um I'll tell you about that when I get back. But I've been getting into old music. I have a weird, kind of funny, kind of weird, yeah, personal story. Don't need to say too many details, but I'll share it with you. That happened to me over the weekend. We were in Kelowna, and I saw a guy there who I was friends with when we were children, and he turned out to be a complete junkie and has a really tragic life path that he took. But we both grew up in the exact same circumstances. We were neighbors. Our moms were best friends. Uh, exact same circumstances. But he basically ended up as a street junkie. He's one of many. I have literally 10 people that I went to high school with in Kelowna that are on the street, that live on the street. But I saw this guy and he got a job and he was working at the Canadian Tire. And anyways, I thought about him and it brought all these memories back, and we got into the car to head back home. And all of a sudden I felt really inspired to listen to the Tragically Hip of all things. And when I was a kid, when I was 12 years old, I loved the Tragically Hip and the album fully completely. If you like just Canadiana rock, is back to back an incredible record. In my opinion, the musicianship, the songwriting, the dynamics of the group, the lyricism is unbelievable. Gord Downey, say what you will about the guy individually, that doesn't matter. His lyrics and his songwriting are next level. I mean, I would almost put them at a level of kind of Shakespeare. And the stories that Gord Downey was able to tell in his lyrics were unbelievable. So, anyways, I'm going to go take a whiz and I'm going to play uh, the track El Dorado, which is the last track off the Tragically Hips fully and completely. And it's a really neat song because it's got a Latin groove, and it's just unlike any other track on the record, but it's still beautiful and it's a beautiful song. So I'm gonna play that while I go take a whiz, and I'll mute this. And so folks in the chat on YouTube, please let everybody know if they're coming in and they're like, "Where's Curtis?" Just let them know that I'm taking a whiz, and Yeah, let's see if we can do this. There we go. All right. I didn't play the whole song. I didn't have to pee that long. Yeah, so sorry, folks. The reason I just muted that on YouTube is just because YouTube's copyright um, police department is very, very strict, and their AI can scan everything live. And if I was playing the Tragically Hip, they would know, and they would shut the stream down. So it's, there seems to be here's an example of remedy. There seems to be a remedy in Twitter right now that Twitter doesn't do that. It could be because I'm not making money from these. Twitter for myself is not monetized. Where is it? I am still monetized mysteriously. In YouTube, though, majorly shadow banned, but it is what it is. Happy to be here regardless. So the other thing I wanted to riff on in this one was this where AI is going, and it kind of ties into um, talking about the EVs and the smart grid and where these technocrats want us to go with all this stuff. But AI is becoming quite crazy. And I think I'm going to kind of make a bit of a prediction on what I think could happen with AI in the short term, because I think it's going to get to a point where everybody's going to be involved in it in some way or another, and there's going to be a turnaround where people are going to reject it. Um, Really interesting movie if you haven't seen it is Johnny Depp movie called Transcendence. And you want to talk about programming? Holy shit. That movie might be 10 years old, maybe. The premise of the movie is that Johnny Depp, he's this like AI scientist, computer scientist, and he's gonna die. And so before he dies, he uploads his brain. He scans his whole brain, and then it turns into an AI. And so there's this sort of philosophical debate that they're putting forward right at the beginning of the movie, which is kind of interesting and interesting to think about. Is that is it actually him? If it's a scan of his brain and all the functions of the brain, and it does the same thing that he would do, but is it him? I don't think it is. I don't think we can replicate spirit. And in a way, that's why I don't fear AI. Is I don't think it'll ever be what the human mind is, especially when people start to realize what the human mind can be, and you start to unravel your limitless potential. And I think that's a life goal of mine, and probably a lot of people as well. Is like, what is the point of life? And maybe it's to just figure out our full potential and express that in our lives. And AI can't do that. At least I don't think it can. at least in terms of free will and being a what makes a man, what makes an individual. Is it just the combination of the algorithms of your thoughts, or is it something else? It's quite an interesting philosophical debate. But anyways, this movie uh, portrays this crazy technocratic dystopia where the AI just learns everything and then just takes over everything. And I don't need to give you a spoiler. It's a Hollywood movie that's actually worth watching. But anyways, I can kind of see where this might be going. But when you look at AI right now, it's crazy what it's doing, and everybody I know is using it. We use it. To not use AI now, to be and be in the internet space, you're going to get lost. The, and so what's happening right now is we're in this super competitive rush into this thing. But the downside is that as we rush in, it's learning everything. So you're feeding the beast, right? You're feeding the machine, but there's this period of time right now where it's a gravy train. And there's in marketing, it's an unbelievable gravy train. Unbelievable what you can do for long, because writing market copy, especially long market copy, which is the best, at least from what I've seen of what sells. Everybody who sells big things uses long copy. This is a technical marketing term, which literally just means long word forms. So, go on freedomfarmers.com, go on our website, long copy. It works. But so long copy normally takes a lot of resources to write because it requires a good understanding of the subject matter, and then also an understanding of human psychology of what people want and what sells, like for better or worse. Marketing is this. I'm agnostic to it. It's just like there's good marketing and there's bad marketing. There's marketing with good intentions. There's bad marketing with bad intentions. What marketing is irrelevant. But it's crazy what AI can do. And so right now we're in this period where people are rushing in. There's a lot of excitement. It's bullish, and money's being made. A lot of people are making money. Recently, though, in the economy, I think a lot of people aren't making money, and that could play into this too. But there's this get in there, run it, use it, and amplify your 1,000x your ability. Like I have friends who ran marketing firms who now run firms with dozens of people with one or two guys because AI can do everything else, and you can just delegate so much stuff, and all you have to do is curate the best of it, and it can just save. I asked AI the other day because I'm thinking about planning this conference this festival in central BC. I won't say where yet because it's none of it's firm. Um, but I asked ChatGPT, give me, this is a pretty benign thing, but just, what does a typical conference schedule look like that runs from this time to this time? How is it breaking down? What are the types of events that happen? And immediately just, wow, okay, that's something. I didn't really use much of it, but it was something because it gives you really idea. Okay, this is what these things kind of look like. Okay, great. You couldn't do that kind of thing before. You'd have to Google a dozen different searches or things to get to that answer. With AI, it's unbelievable. So I think where this is going is that everybody's going to get in and use this thing. It's going to learn all this stuff, and then it's going to create. And I'd say we're right at that now. Just look at the content. Everybody's using AI for content. Look at all the videos and stuff people are making now. These AI videos are getting absolutely insane. So the content is ratcheting up, as in it's a machine gun assault of content, and it's going to get even more of that, 1,000x that. I think it get to the point where those classic, like what do they call those sci-fi movies where you're in a city and it's all dark, and it's like Blade Runner style, where there's holograms and animations and things all around just coming at you all the time. Will literally have that. That will be through probably Google Glass. You can get your your Google glasses that'll just have projected, and probably eye implants soon enough, probably within 5, 10 years, you'll see that you have these augmented reality everywhere you go. And so, there's Black Mirror episodes on this kind of thing, but it is going to get there. And I think what it's going to do is create such a boom in content that just like when you read the history books of American history about the classic story about what happened in the Great Depression, and I don't necessarily think that's the story that is really telling the whole story, but the story as it goes talks about this run up into manufacturing and the Ford plant and Ford manufacturing, assembly line manufacturing, where they just overproduced all this stuff, and then boom, there was too much stuff for people to buy, and now people can't afford stuff. I think we could go into a similar thing with AI and content, is that there'll be this massive flux of all this stuff, of this content, that there's just too many people around. There's not enough people around to consume it all, because the creation of the content is so cheap that you don't even have to, like, it just makes itself, that it's going to become worthless. And so this is where this conundrum happens in the economy. We already have seen a bit of this during COVID, and starting in COVID is where a lot of the tech sector people and people with pencil pushing office jobs were the ones that actually lost their jobs over the guys that were in manufacturing or the guys that were doing labor. Is 10 years ago, the narrative in the economy, and we all heard this if you went through high school in the 90s, or maybe some point after that, it stayed the same. I don't know, but I graduated in 98, so I can't say with experience, but the narrative back then was get a desk job, right? The narrative back then was do something that's highly specialized on a computer, or work in an office, work in the government, be an administrator, be a lawyer, be a scientist, be a computer scientist, be a graphic artist. Don't be a logger. Don't be a farmer. Don't be a mechanic. Don't be whatever. Don't work with your hands and don't produce physical stuff. Produce digital stuff on this side of the economy. Well, it turned out that those are the most vulnerable jobs, because all of those jobs can be replicated by, at first, software, maybe even hardware too. Yeah, you can actually definitely say within technology, hardware has replaced a lot of people. Software has replaced definitely more. And now AI is going to replace a significant amount even more. And, one thing I kind of get stoked about when I think about even what you could do with AI for the side of good right now, as I think about, if I could just train my own chat bot, if I could have my own Grok or Chat GPT, because I've tried it with both of these and it doesn't work. Well, not as much as I'd want it to be. Is you could ask, this could be a sort of like not a revolutionary move, but something to certainly keep the pencil pushers busy, is you could get an AI to script a tsunami of legal paperwork to inundate the courts with notices of liability or whatever it might be. You could basically cloud and pivot the legal system with AI. If you could, and it would be pretty cool. Like, just imagine, train a chat bot to just write notices and just bill people. It'd be pretty hardcore. I mean, I'm gonna have Cal Washington on these Liberty on the Land talks coming up soon. I've talked to him. He's down. Problem is, he doesn't know how to use Twitter. In Power Movement, this organization he's part of, has a Twitter account, so he might come on. But Cal has been a long-term friend of mine, mentor for me, and with so many things with the law. Cal did this thing back in 2014 called a notice of liability to the corporation of Fortis over the smart meters. I've talked about this before in these streams. And anyways, this is where I first witnessed the power of paperwork. It was the first place that I saw, holy shit, this actually does stuff. You can actually change things with this. Is we put the CEO of Fortis on notice for a huge amount of money. And 200 people filed registered paperwork to this clown and made him resign in 24 hours because we put so much economic pressure on him. And that's what the law does. The law is just about money. It's all about money and commerce and consent and capacity and a bunch of other things too. But we made this guy resign. So one thing Cal's involved in right now is he's taken his notice of liability, and I'll have him on the show sometime soon. We'll talk about this. Uh, this idea is next level. It's next level gravy. They're noticing bureaucrats and technocrats all around the world. All these medical technocrats that we saw, like Theresa Tam or Bonnie Henry, or any of these health people that look like ghouls, putting them on notice in a collective action process, and they're making people resign all around the world. All around the world, people are resigning, and what they're doing is they're putting the amount for the liability on there, as you do with a notice of liability. You put an amount to say you're liable for this number at this many for this many days until this thing is settled, and that's the liability. They've come up with this notice of liability to put people on notice for everything from the chemtrails to the GMOs to the mRNA in the food to the shots, all this stuff, and they're making these people resign. And they're creating a crypto, or that maybe they could just do it with Bitcoin. But anyways, they're taking that monetary instrument, which is a bill. That's why it's called a bill. You send a bill as a notice of liability as a bill, just like you get a bill at the restaurant. It's a bill to pay. It's all this whole thing is just a racket. It's just all about money. And so they're taking the collective amount of those bills that are issued and creating a monetary instrument out of it. And that's what the bankers do. That's what the bankers do. They monetize your ass. They monetize your birth certificate. They bond you basically from birth, and then they use that asset to make money exponentially. They're doing the same thing, but they're making it more based on liability and responsibility than just liability to service a debt that you never had anything to do with. It's you're servicing a debt that you caused, Bonnie Henry or whoever it is. And what they want to do is take the total asset value of all of those notices issued, combine it to create the market capitalization of a new form of a currency. It's pretty badass. Now, whether it works or not, or what, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I don't know if it's all going to work, but it's a pretty cool idea. And they're doing that. So I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting, but I'll definitely have Cal on the show to talk about it at some point. But that's what would be kind of fun to do with AI, is just get it to, like, I could, because if I could give AI the things that I know about the law fundamentally, call it the understanding that it's all commerce. Like everything, it just comes down to money. Not in common law, not in trust and all that. I'm talking about in the legal system as we know it, statute law, uniform commercial code. It's all about money. It's all about the bull. It's all about the buck. It's all about the bill. It's all about, but it's also about disclosure, and it's also about consent. But it is all about commerce at the end of the day. Get it to understand that, and then say, hey, write me 100 notices for this department, and this department, and this department, for this liability, blah, blah, blah. Give it the things and just have it reproduce documents that are absolute word salads. Because in the war of words, it really, and this is in law, it's almost what it is too. It's a war of words. It's a war of calling bluffs and just calling bullshit. Because the way they trick you, the way the state tricks you with everything, is they send you some kind of letter that says you're in violation of code blah blah blah, and you need to do this and you need to do that.
everything that they send you is actually just an offer to contract. It's an offer to submit to their jurisdiction so that they could administrate your life in some way or another and make you pay for it. That's literally what, if you get a government letter, no matter what the bureau or agency is, that's fundamentally what it does. It is. And they want to get you into some kind of liability thing. They want to get you into something that, well, waives them of liability, but then you pay for it. And you go, well, why would I pay you to waive liability? I'll just waive it. But anyways, this is what they do. They just trick you with words. And the reason most people get intimidated by that is they send a big pile of words your way, and you're not, you might not be that abreast with legalese, and you're intimidated because this thing had 20 pages and there's some threatening language in it and it looks kind of, and you're overwhelmed. And so you submit to the request, which is to accept, or you go get a lawyer, which is the dumbest thing to do. Of course, there's reasons for everything. So, I don't want to say that that doesn't ever make sense, but in my experience, there's never been a use for that, except if I wanted just to like have somebody notarize a contract in business or something like that. But for the most part, lawyers are useless, in my opinion. They only just take your money. Um, or you deny the conditions, which is just a way to accept. So let me break this down. There's four doors. I've talked about this before, but it's worth iteration. You guys jamming on this? Are we getting into the gravy now? There's four doors that you can interact with the state. So I talked about, there's politics, there's administration, and there's law. When the state sends you a letter, there's four things you can do, really. You can accept the conditions, which is just sign on the dotted line and take whatever they got. Or you can refuse the conditions. But refusal often gets you into a state of belligerence. And then belligerence just leads you to acceptance because then they just force you. Or you can go silent, which is to accept, because most letters, if you've gone through the rigmarole and you've gone, say you just ignore it, they send you a letter. This is why I always say respond to everything they send you. If they send you a letter, respond. Sometimes things don't have conditions on them, then who cares? But if they send you a letter that has conditions on it that says you must do this, otherwise this happens, you got to respond. So you respond to everything. But uh, it could so the other one would be go silent, but that's to accept, because if you go silent, you tacitly agree under their contract. Or you can accept with conditions. So you can accept the offer and put it back into their court. And this is where you get into this whole philosophical process. It's illegal, but philosophical in the basis of the framework is that it's just a bullshit game. Is how long can we do this until I call bullshit on you, and then you back away, because it's like the myth of the vampire. And the myth of the vampire is that when the vampire comes to the door and he wants to suck your blood, he can only suck your blood if you let him into his house, into your house. If you don't let him in, he can't get you. You have to agree. You have to go voluntarily. And that has a significant amount of proverbial meaning across many facets of the human experience, in my opinion. But it's like the myth of the vampire. And so, if you accept with conditions, well, you do a couple things. One is, the first thing you do is you reset the clock. So in law, when letters are sent and they're received, the clock's reset. So if I send a letter to you and say you're liable for XYZ, and if you don't respond within 72 hours or 21 days or whatever it is, XYZ is going to happen. You send me back a letter, immediately that clock is reset, and now the next thing is submitted. And so that's the first thing you do, which is important in and of itself, because that shows you that at the very least, even if you don't think you have a good defense and you don't even know what your defense is yet, you reset the clock and you buy yourself time, and you can kick the can down the road for a damn long time because everything in the courts is glacial. It moves at a glacial pace. And so always respond, because at the very least, you reset the clock. But moreover, you also put another offer on the table. And that offer can be whatever you want, really, within reason. But fundamentally, where all this stuff goes, and I don't want to, this is where I can get too deep in it. And this is the kind of thing that for private conversations is such a better thing to get into. But um, what was I going to say? You are not obligated to perform anything without compensation. And so one thing, one way, this is one thing Cal Washington taught me back in the day was, and I want to talk about remedy in more of a foundational, fundamental way than I'm going to tell you how to do a direct remedy for a direct thing, because that would not be safe to do in a platform like this. Would not be beneficial to me in any way to do that. But fundamentally, what you do is you go above jurisdiction. So you probably know about the sort of chains of jurisdiction. So if you don't, um, within the legal system that we experience in the world, the statute law legal system, there's there's levels of jurisdiction. So the lowest level of jurisdiction would be most likely municipal or county. No, actually, no. Even lower, the lowest form of jurisdiction would be company policy, would be corporate charter. So you have a company and its mission is to create widgets, and you have a charter that outlines what the values and the mission of the company is to do it, produce profit for shareholders and produce this many widgets a year, blah blah blah. You have a corporate charter that talks about the administration of the board of directors, how that's formed, and all that legalese BS. That really is probably your lowest form of law in sort of mergers and acquisitions, company charter policy. Above that, you would have municipal um, something. So a district that you're in, municipal district. Then you might have a regional or a county jurisdiction. Then you might have a provincial or a state jurisdiction. Then above that, you have a federal jurisdiction. Above that, you'd have international treaty jurisdiction. And then Cal seems to think that it goes infinitely, actually. And we've had some pretty esoteric conversations about spiritual jurisdictions and where what law really is this uh, earthly laws that are boiled down to a sort of a lower frequency to control and compartmentalize people. And so one way, the fundamental way to get remedy in most things is to appeal to higher jurisdictions. Is that if you if somebody comes at you with an ordinance, uh, you know, some what do they call it? An infraction, or no, what is it? What's the word I'm trying to look for? Anyways, you've done something outside of a statute or an ordinance uh, in a municipal or regional area. Well, if you are familiar with provincial law, you could look at provincial law, and if there's something that contradicts what they're asking you to do in that lower jurisdiction, that's going to be a remedy. And you can sometimes just go right to the top. You can sometimes go right to the top of things. And that's where, I've talked about that one. There is one article that is so fundamental, and it's one of the things that I am willing to share with people, because you might be able to figure this out yourself anyways, and it doesn't really uh, wake up too many slaves, because that is fundamentally what this game is you can walk away, and you can walk away silently, but if you wake up too many slaves, they will kill you. And so I don't want to wake up any slaves. I don't care about slaves anymore. I don't care that that um, I don't care that people want to wake up or anything like that. So, oh, what the hell's the news machine? Funny. Um, so I don't care about waking up slaves. I just care about mobilizing people who are already awake. I care about giving people the tools to take the responsibility and the reins of freedom, liberty, and prosperity. That's what I care about, and so that's my lane. I'll help those people. I don't need to wake up the sheeple. Other people who want to go out and broadcast to the stupid masses can do that, but that's not what I want. And so that's where those people are served by the political space. Barking about whatever Justin Trudeau said today, barking about whatever the Trump case, oh Trump can't run in Colorado, whatever the latest lame political thing that the algorithm is promoting you to talk about. That's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in real solutions for freedom. And one article that I've talked about many times, it's always worth repeating because I think as many times as I've repeated it, I doubt many of you have actually looked at this. But maybe I'll share it right now. Is I'll pull it up on the screen too. It's the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. You want to go to Article 8 on this, and I'll share my screen here. And this is an example of a high jurisdictional remedy that actually um, solves a lot of problems right here. And it's in reference to slavery. Article 8, 1. No one shall be held in slavery. Slavery and the slave trade in all forms shall be prohibited. Number 2, no one shall be held in servitude. Number 3, A, no one shall be required to perform forced or compulsory labor. B, paragraph 3A shall not be held to preclude in countries where imprisonment with hard labor may be imposed as punishment for a crime, the performance of hard labor in pursuance of the sentence to such punishment by a uh, competent court. C, for the purpose of this paragraph, the term forced or compulsory shall not include one, any work or service not referred to in subparagraph B, subparagraph B, normally required of a person who is under detention in consequence of a lawful order of a court or of being during conditional release from such detention. 2, any military service or military character and in countries where conscientious objection is recognized, any national service required by law of consequence objectors. 3, any service exacted in cases of emergency or calamity of threatening the life and well-being of the community. And 4, any work or service which forms part of normal civil obligations. But right here is pretty much the gravy right there. 2A. No one shall be required to perform forced or compulsory labor. Now, did they really define what that meant there? Did they really, you know, what is that? Well, you could make the case fairly easily that compulsory labor could be filling out a form. You're asking me to perform. You're asking me to perform without compensation. So, right there. There's a lot of gravy in the law when you get into it, and the higher you go, the more interesting it gets. The UN treaties are an absolute gravy train of double speak, and all these assholes that write this stuff up. They're all covering their ass, but they're also giving you a way out. So they're doing kind of three things at once. They're covering their ass, but they're also creating a racket for the thing that they say they're um, standing against, and they're giving you the way out at the same time. It's a trifecta. So the way that they're um, the way that they're sort of they're creating chains for you is that mainly nobody reads this shit. Nobody reads it. And so there's all these remedies in the system that are all there. They're right. Like you don't, this isn't free man stuff. This isn't free man on the land stuff. It's just like right in the box, reading the legal statutes as they're written. But the higher you go, the more this supersedes because in treaties are what's considered supreme law. Is that treaties will supersede any even federal jurisdiction if a country signs on to a treaty. So um, they change what am I trying to say? They write all this stuff below to get you trapped. And that's why a city ordinance sends you this thing, you're in violation of blah, 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 blah. But if you go above that, you're like, this thing is irrelevant because this agreement was made here. Hey, thanks for the other big super chats tonight, brother. Thank you, Larry. Another $20 super chat. Yeah, can I share the link? Sure. It's right here. I'll put it in the Twitter Spaces as well. So yeah, just slide down to Article 8 there, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But I can go in here. Now, last time wait, where am I going to share this? I'll share this, folks, in the comments of the post that I made in Twitter because last time I went in, I have a difficult time navigating the space from the phone because it's kind of hard to mess around with the phone for me. I just don't really like to. But I put it in the post that I made about the space. So if you want that link, it's in there. But anyways, I kind of went on this whole tangent with the law because I was kind of geeking out on this potential way to use AI to just hammer the court system. Just absolutely hammer it. They wouldn't be able to handle the administrative cost unless they're using AI too, which maybe they are, you know, maybe they are. Hey, you know what we're going to do, folks? We're going to take a call here. I'm going to bring in Levity Farms and the folks on YouTube can hear this as well. Let's see what Levity Farms has got to say. So, folks on YouTube, this is you. If you get on Twitter at Off Grid Stone, you follow me. Same thing, but let's hope that this connects. Hopefully, we're really socked in right now, and I'm amazed that the bandwidth has been happening and working as long as it has been. But yeah, so Levity Farms, when you connect, just go ahead and just chime in. I'll just keep kind of riffing. Actually, yeah, what I wanted to say is I'm doing this event. I've been invited to speak at this event in Christian Valley, BC, which is kind of close to Beaverdale, if you know where Beaverdale is outside of Kelowna. So I've been invited to speak at this thing, and it's like a land cooperative thing. It's like a bunch of people oh, Levity Farms dropped out. He might have to just come back in. That's okay. Sometimes you just got to drop out and then rejoin and then request again. I'm speaking at this thing. It's not private. They said I could promote it if I want, but I think they can only handle like it's on this piece of land and it's pretty cool. It's 26 kilometers up the Christian Valley, if you know where that is. And again, it's just like you go to West Bridge, and then you just up the Christian Valley, you go 26 kilometers up. Anyways, I don't want to share a link to it publicly because I don't want to inundate them with too many people. But if you're in BC and you want to hang out with a bunch of truthers, on New Year's Eve, there's an event. It's free and there's food provided. I think it's free because they're going to pitch to people their land cooperative because there's a bunch of people that are involved in it and I think they want partners. And so there's that kind of element going to it. So I don't want to just blast the link out here and inundate them with too much because I think they want people who respect what they're going to do and they want people who are potentially interested. But people can just come too. But anyways, they have places to stay for 50 people. So 50 people can come and camp there in a warm place. There's cabins and whatnot. And they have rentals and stuff, but there's like an assembly hall where a bunch of people, I guess, going to sleep in. I'm not sleeping in the assembly hall. I said I need my own place at least. But I'm going to be speaking at that event and just, doing a lot of this. But, private conversations are a lot more interesting. And, anyways, that's happening on New Year's Eve. It's actually happening and I'll tell you how you can find out about this. Is you have to contact me and I'll send you a link to it. And then there's a form you have to fill out. Because I think they don't want random idiots coming to this thing. So it's on the 20, no, it's on the 30th and the 31st. So it's a Saturday, Sunday thing. And if you want to know about it, contact me on my website. So go to theurbanfarmer.co and go to the contact form there and say Christian Valley event, and then I'll send you a link to the form. And so this is an untypical event, right? It's not just this public event where, hey, blast it out, let's get thousands of people there. It's not like that. It's more intimate. There might be 50 to 100 people there. I'll be speaking for until they tell me to stop, basically, because I can do that. And he was asking me, like, what do you want to talk about? I was like, dude, I don't even know. I'll see what the other guys talk about and I'll decide then. And he's like, great. And he's like, oh, I just want to make sure that you're not talking about the same thing as everybody else. I'm like, dude, I could talk about anything for days. So I'll see what they say and then I'll take it from there. But so I'll be speaking in the after dinner. There's a dinner and everything. It sounds kind of a neat event. I can't vouch for the whole land cooperative thing they're doing. I don't know much about it. I was connected to the group through some people that I know and that I like. And these people knew these other people that said, hey, they'd like you to speak. Okay. What can, sure. So I'll be there talking about it. So yeah, if you're interested in that, just people on Twitter, you could just message me on Twitter if you can message me on Twitter. I think you can. Or you can just go to the urbanfarmer.co and go to contact and then just send me a little generic message, but just put Christian Valley event in the subject and I'll send you the information and then you can decide if you want to go, but it's free. So, and it's free food. You only have to pay if you want to stay there. But I think if you had an RV or something you wanted to camp, you can camp for free. It's on a big acreage. It's a really cool piece of property. It's a beautiful piece of property on this. It's got to be at least 9 meters or no, 3 meters or 9 feet off the river, but really beautiful piece of property. And I look at properties all the time. So I was like, oh, this is a pretty nice piece of land. So, and there's like multiple houses on it and stuff. It's kind of neat. I think they're trying to do some kind of cooperative thing on the land. So that's happening. And yeah, if you want to go to that or you're in the BC area, just again, Lynn asking, how do we contact you? Lynn, go to my website, theurbanfarmer.co. I don't want to give my email address out because then it just gets spammed. So go to theurbanfarmer.co and then go to contact. There's a contact form in there. Go to that and then just say, hey, what about that event? And I'll send you the contact form. I just don't want to share it online. It's just maybe we don't need to have too many people there, but and sometimes I think there's value in a level of filtration in that um it's kind of like I've had this experience for many years doing private consulting and public speaking and stuff like that and teaching workshops with people like physical people. I found that when things are too cheap and they're too accessible, it just brings out a lot of people that probably shouldn't be there. But when there's a higher barrier to entry, and this is an elitist thing to say, there's no question about it. It's an exclusivist, elitist thing to say. There's no question about it. But from my experience, as somebody who's organized events and done things like this, it filters out a lot of people who could potentially be really annoying. When when I used to teach workshops at Concordia University in Montreal on farming, they would subsidize a ticket. And so you could come and do a 2 day intensive workshop with me for $40. Whereas when I used to do those on people's farms or in different environments, I would charge hundreds of dollars for that. Like sometimes it'd be $4.99 or something like that, because the information was valuable and it really helped people. People who are serious got a ton of value out of it. The $500 was insignificant to the value that you'd get and you'd be able to run with right after. And so I found that if I charged what the value was, yes, you might get less people there, but you'd actually make more money and you have a better experience for the students, because then you have less annoying people. When things are really cheap and they're really free, you get people like, so from the teacher's perspective, which is, where I'm coming from, you get the classic know-it-alls who will like sit at the front of the class, and they're not even there to learn. They're just there to have a soapbox. And because the ticket was cheap or subsidized or free, they don't have any skin in the game. And so they just show up and are annoying. And everybody who's a teacher has seen that. You get those people in the class that do that. And when there's a monetary relationship to that, it can make it better or worse. And I find, generally speaking, when things are priced, when people get priced out, you price those people out. And so then you get more people that are serious, which actually creates a better atmosphere for the people who are serious. So the people who actually are willing to pay get better value, because you filtered out all the annoying people who waste people's time. And I'm generally pretty good at shutting those people down. Like I don't tolerate that for very long. I've taught workshops all over the world, with class sizes of 30 to 100 people, and I'm pretty good at shutting that stuff down. In my earlier days, I wasn't, but now the older I get, the less patient I am, and the more I should respect people's time. And so I shut those kind of people down. But anyways, that's my rant on filtration. So yeah, again, if you want to attend that event, message me at theurbanfarmer.co through the contact form, and I will help you. Oh, Pierre. Hey, Pierre's in the YouTube and the space. Says I prefer one-on-one consulting and training. I do too. And I prefer doing that as well for people, because it is really the best way to just deliver people value that's totally um adjusted for their context. And you know, there's ways to do that in workshops. I'm trying to figure that out, because I'm thinking about doing like a mastermind type workshop here on my homestead, and it'd be a similar process. Like I'd really have to filter people out. You'd be filtered out by price, and I would probably have a survey, definitely some kind of survey that people would take, and I would probably interview people too, especially for that one, because it's going to be I'm going to do like a 2 day mastermind thing with me. We'll be a smaller group, and make sure it's a group of people that will gel, but then really help people figure things out. And sometimes group settings are good for those things too. I actually find, as Pierre said, um, one-on-one consulting is great, but group consulting is actually can sometimes be better, because sometimes you can learn a lot by just stepping back. So one thing I've always enjoyed about doing these kinds of things, because I've done these a mastermind things similar in the past, where I've had more intensive, um, but more intimate workshop events that I've done, is that in a group, even 20 people, even 30 people, 30 people might be pushing it, but 20 people you can do it with, where if you stretch it out over 2 days, everybody will have enough one-on-one time with somebody like me, or whoever the facilitator is, or the instructor. They'll get enough one-on-one time with me between all the breaks, all the Q&As of the sections of the sessions, and the lunches, and I do evenings and stuff too. When I do these things, we'll do like dinners and stuff like that, be fully catered, or we'll go to a restaurant or something together as a group, book the whole restaurant. That's what we've done in the past. Is that people get a lot of the one-on-one time. They actually get more than they need, but the thing that they get that they don't get in the one-on-one is that they get to be a fly on a wall with other people's stuff. And you actually learn a ton by just listening, um, especially in those kinds of environments. So, anyways, we'll be doing something like that as well in the summer. And people have been reaching out. I said people to people in the last stream in the last space, um, reach out if that kind of thing interests you and let me know what kind of thing you're interested in learning about, and then I can kind of help craft the best type of experience for that. So thanks for those of you who have done that. Um, Sam in the chat says, "How much for that thing at your place?" I'm not sure yet. I know that it won't be cheap cheap. Like it's probably going to be like $1,000 or something like that. I don't know yet, but it will be it will be in that range. The way I look at anything that I price it is that if I know if I'm going to charge that much money for something, and I've taught workshops on farms where we charged $2,500. So we did a workshop at Jean Martin's farm a few years ago, him and we charged $2,500. It was sold out, and people were just um, flabbergasted with how much value that we delivered. And that's how I do it. So I'm not just going to charge people a bunch of money just to get a bunch of money. The value is going to be there. And so that's how I price things. And yeah, I just find going cheap on things often just doesn't serve anybody. It means that the host doesn't make money. It means that most people that come have a bad experience, and it's just a lose lose across the board. There's a time and a place though, right? There's a time and a place for everything. But from in what I'm doing, I found it better to do those kinds of events than be on a stage and deliver you know hammer a keynote presentation, and I can do that too. And those are actually honestly, those are harder to it's harder is if you're a public speaker, it's harder to do that than it is to do a well, no, it's not, because if you're involved in logistics of organizing a multi-day event, which I am, and my wife gets involved too. We're gonna have like unschooling stuff for kids too, so people can bring their kids. But it is difficult to do short speeches. It's really difficult. You really have to time it and nail it. If you've ever got into the elevator pitch, or what's that thing that everybody Toastmasters and stuff like that. It's hard to deliver powerful um, short term speeches to convey ideas. So yeah. So hey, if anybody wants to, I'm feeling like I'm running to the point in this stream or this space where we could open up the calls if people want to request to speak. Try that, and I can bring you in, and I'll look at some of the chats in the YouTube here, see what you guys are saying, and yeah. Yeah, Pierre says you attract very serious attendees. Well, that's just it. That's why, I mean, what I'm talking about here is nothing new. It's nothing even controversial, but look at people who deliver huge amounts of value. I've been a Tony Robbins fan since I was like 16 years old. He's one of the guys that I always am interested in what he's got to say, and I can't say much about him personally, and nor do I care to or really care to get into his personal life, or but he delivers an insane amount of value. Uh, I've read a lot of his books, and he delivers an insane amount of value. I've also have a number of friends that have gone to his events, and these events are expensive. Some of these events are like $10,000, but everybody goes, "Holy shit, I got a lot of value." So perceived value is a really interesting thing. It's a really interesting thing in marketing. It's a really interesting thing in just you know thinking about value and mindset. there's something about it. There's something about the reason I keep people on the YouTube, like the reason I keep taking off my glasses is so that I can look at the phone to see if there's if there's anybody's requesting to speak. Um, is yeah, there, it's quite multifaceted, but it's really interesting. Uh, Salem says, "Hey Curtis, are you willing to discuss slash debate the American national or status correction issue?" No, I don't care, and here's why. If you don't think it exists, then don't pursue it. All the power to you. I could care less to convince anybody about anything in the law. If you have a narrative that you have found is correct, ride that pony till the till the day's end, my friend. No, because I don't care to wake you up. So, but I also think, yeah, hey, well, no, see, I know that that exists because I've seen it. Do I want to prove to you by disclosing individuals' paperwork that that exists? No, I wouldn't do that because that would be commingling private matters in the public. So these kinds of things aren't worth debating. You know, if people want to debate me on, say, some of the things that I talk about in the law, where I say, you know, everything is contract, everything needs consent, and then somebody wants to debate me on that, it's like, no, I'm not going to waste my time trying to wake you up. Go ahead and plug back into the matrix, man. I don't give a shit. So no, I don't want to debate you on that. Just don't participate in it. Go tell as many people that I'm wrong about everything. Go and tell everybody that you're right, and I could care less. So, um, yeah. So no, no. Thanks for the offer, though. I appreciate it, and I like debate on some issues, but public issues I'd rather debate. I don't want to debate people on remedy because that's that's a recipe for that's taking private matters public, and that's commingling lawful things in the political space. That's just not that's not what I'm willing to do. But I appreciate what you're you know what you're saying. It says it's nuanced. Case law clearly points to two nationalities. Can one correct their status via passport application? No, but Godspeed. Yeah, and I never said anything about whether it's through a passport application or anything like that. Generally speaking, in law, when you're applying, you're submitting to a lower jurisdiction. So I would say that's that's not going to do anything for you. That's just a losing scenario. So I'm wanting to be helpful. No worries. No, I appreciate that, and that's all good. But the thing too is the U.S. Legal state is not my uh, it's not my biggest strength. Like I'm not I can talk about the framework of things. I can talk about the foundational things when they come to the US. I can talk about some US history that I'm familiar with, but I'm no remedy guy in the US. No, where I have experiences in Canadian law. And um, so yeah, I don't really have a dog in that fight regardless, you know. I can tell you though that there's a lot of people out there in the US who have figured it out, and I know far more people in the US that have figured it out than I do in Canada. And that probably just comes down to the numbers that there's just 10 times more people in the US um, than there is in Canada. It says, I've done my own study research for 15 plus years. Of a lot of gurus out there are just wrong on their interpretations of the law. There's no question about that. I'll agree with you there 100%. Most of these remedy gurus are full of shit. Most of them are just trying to drag you along and take you for a ride and make money. So I agree. But let's take a call here from Yamason Nightboy 13, and hopefully he's able to connect. There he is, brother. Just click unmute your mic there on the bottom left, and you'll be able to chime in. How you doing?
Um, so you just mentioned that I'm in the U.S. and you said the legal system isn't you're not well known in that. But I have a herbal business and we do like a lot of fairs and festivals, and I'm looking to do more like big festivals and sell my herbal goods there.
Yep.
But they're always asking for like business license, and usually I just give them a social security number. And I mean, not too many of the smaller places like check for that, but the big ones where the entry fee is like $1,000 to get in.
Right.
Uh, like I've been holding back on getting business license for a while.
Right. Right.
Uh,
Well,
we're doing a sales correction too with a group of people all around the world, but we're based mostly in Florida.
okay.
But, so I do have them to talk to, but they haven't gotten back to me yet.
Well, and the status correction thing isn't going to change your outcome on what you're talking about anyways. Because what you're talking about goes right down in the lowest jurisdiction is company policy. So there's no remedy for you in the legal in that regard because you're in a private contract where you can choose to be in it or not. And so there's no other option because it's not the state providing the service. You're not you're not you have no right to its benefit. Whereas if it was the state offering the service, you would have a right to benefit in some way. And so then a legal remedy would do something for you. But in this case, you're right in company policy, and either you can play a part of the company policy or not. And so I don't even think status correction is going to make a difference for you there because even if you have that, that doesn't tell them anything. It doesn't necessarily even waive you of liability in their perspective. So I would say there you either choose to or not. There's nothing wrong with having a business license. It's not going to prevent you from doing anything. It just means yeah, but yes, but you can use, and this is a thing for your group to is where do trusts play into that and special purpose vehicles is that sometimes the business can be the front end of a trust and a special purpose vehicle. And I don't want to get too deep into this stuff on these public chats because this is not, I'm already even getting into that. I'm even going too deep than I think is the proper context for these public conversations. But no, I appreciate what you're saying, what you're bringing forward, and it's a good example of you got to ask yourself at the end of the day, what is the value you want to get out of this, and is it worth the cost or benefits? And I think in your case, it might be because just because you have a license to do a business in a certain thing doesn't mean that that license applies to everything you do. It might just apply to a certain thing you do or a certain business or enterprise within a business. So it's not necessarily a trap. And I'm we do it differently in Canada because we don't have the status correction thing up here. It's not a thing. And so I just go right in and I just go in like Neo in the Matrix and I just use the Matrix by understanding what it is and what it isn't and who I am and who I'm not and who am I at this capacity when I'm in this role in this contract. And I go into those things knowingly and I just use them willingly or not. And so it just becomes a personal assessment of whether it's going to be worth it for you in this regard or not. Because in this case for you, it might be that license offers a whole new end of market access that you didn't have prior. And that's a big part of what the whole racket does is it gives you access or it doesn't give you access. And the state puts pressure on large organizations for liability. And it always comes down to liability. And then they have to enforce that. And so that's where we're even seeing in the New World Order now is that most of the policies from the New World Order will be implemented on a company level, just like you're experiencing right now, but on a grander scale. So yeah, that's all I know really can say to that, brother.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I leave the things blank. They don't check it. Sometimes I put my social security number, but no one's ever said anything. I don't think I've gone to a big event, an event big enough for them to check.
Right.
Someone wanted to run a background check on me to see if we had.
that's all I really can say to that, brother.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, so I'm just gonna remove people as they, because I find with these spaces, if I keep too many people's mics loaded, then some people just turn their mics on randomly. But let's see what Chris Fenning has got to say. Hey Chris, yeah, there you go. You're in. How you doing, brother?
First time caller.
Right on. Super, super. This is fun.
Super fun, super fun. Yeah, just putting a vote in for maybe, getting some farmers in on these conversations, just talking about, you know, what's happening in their lives, specifically people like JM. I really liked that one time. I think you were in Montreal and you and JM were just riffing for a while.
Oh, like in that greenhouse, that Concordia, like a 10-year-old video or something.
Yeah, yeah, there was that one, but there was a more recent one too.
Was
Maybe
there?
before you moved up to the hill there.
Oh, huh.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been up until COVID, I went to Montreal twice a year. I left there in 2008 and I literally went twice a year for up until that point. So yeah, there was, and every time I go out to Quebec, I stay at JM's, or him and I do stuff together. So okay, well, that's good to know. I mean, what other farmers are on your radar right now?
It's funny because actually was on YouTube today, Curtis, and I was actually your old buddy John Hofer.
Yes.
And I know he's not farming anymore, and I was following all that, But really, I really liked how intense that dude was.
Oh, he's
like how clear-headed he was, and just on it.
yeah, he's intense. John Hofer is as they say in Alberta, there's more Hofers than gophers. He's a Hutterite. So he has that hardcore build it fast, make it happen attitude. Yeah, totally. Yeah, he's not farming anymore, but he is homesteading.
Yeah, I mean, talking to Tyler, just seeing how some of these, high level farmers, what they're seeing as far as, the demands and, where they see the world going as far as,
Yeah. Well, you know what? I can, if you ask me some names, I can give you some updates because I do stay in touch with all these guys. Ray Tyler is fucking crushing. He's crushing right now. His daughter, who is now his oldest daughter, he has 6 kids. His oldest daughter, Asha, I think she's like 16 now. She's running like a good chunk of the farm, and they're doing $500,000 on half an acre of land in Western Tennessee, all under high tunnels. So the whole operation, the whole half acre is under Caterpillar tunnels, and just open-ended Caterpillar tunnels, mostly to keep the rain off in the summer, but they do extend their season. But no, they're crushing it. Eric Schultz down in Mesa, Arizona, he's crushing. He's a guy I've done a lot of videos with in the past. He's crushing. Who else? JM. I mean, JM's doing a whole other thing now. He's running a restaurant. He's running like a fancy restaurant in southern Quebec. He's not doing the FQT farm anymore. Um, yeah, who else? Fuck, I don't know.
It's really cool to see what you're doing. Because I kind of lived similar for a while there, off grid, doing the whole thing, and people love to talk about doing it, but to actually do it is it's next level.
Oh, dude, I know. So many people talk, but that's what's kind of been cool about. I don't know. Maybe it's a blessing that things have kind of slowed down, at least somewhat. It's not as crazy as it was with COVID, but you know, the little reprise is a bit nice. But maybe it made people slack off. But in a way, I appreciate it. I mean, I was when the lockdowns were happening, man, I was just going so full throttle, and I made a lot of mistakes because I was coming out of a place of fear in some regards. I made some decisions a little too hastily. I could have waited and spent way less money and stuff like that. So I don't know.
I don't even really watch the news or follow the world because it doesn't affect my life, and I'm not going to live in fear. But I love these long form things that you do because I kind of just put it on and hit play and just do whatever I need to do around the house or the property, and I can just like kind of get caught up to the way the world's shaking out.
Yeah.
You keep a pulse on it. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I do the same. You know, I love long form content. It's really all I listen to. I don't really just sit there and crank through 3-minute YouTube videos, or I hate TikTok, so I don't watch any of that stuff. But yeah, no, I appreciate that, man. And what do you think about this whole running spaces and the YouTube live stream at the same time? Is that working out?
It's only because of you, Curtis, that I actually downloaded the Spaces app on my phone, brother.
No way. Oh,
I actually had it downloaded just to listen to you.
right on. But you weren't listening on YouTube?
Totally.
Oh, but you wanted to go into the spaces next after the stream, right? Yeah,
Sure.
right on.
It's great. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's a neat platform. I mean, I've really been enjoying the spaces thing, and I've listened to some great conversations on them, and you kind of just stumble across stuff, and you're like, wow, this is really cool. And you know, because like in YouTube, we can't do this. Like
Right.
well, I could put it a Zoom link, and then you could jump in the Zoom link. But the problem with doing that is that too many people jump on it. YouTube, because it's all video, it bogs down. And so I don't know. Twitter seemed to got this kind of dialed in. I'm seeing people in the chat saying that there's less lag in the space than there is on YouTube, which makes sense because it's just audio. But, you know, old Elon Musk buddy there put a ton of money into this platform. So it seems to be working.
It's gonna work.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway, appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Chris. Good to talk to you. Yeah, you too, brother. Well, isn't that cool? What do you guys think about this in the YouTube world? Um, so are we still talking Pokemon? No, we're not. Uh, L Dan says, any thoughts on John Coleman's Tavistock book? I haven't read it, but I do know all about the Tavistock Institute, and they've been referenced in a lot of different books that I've read. So I haven't read that book, but Tavistock Institute's a real rabbit hole if you want to look at, you know, people who are directly implicated in all kinds of heinous psychological crimes. The Tavistock Institute is, you know, top of mind. You know, the whole transgender thing was literally just made up in the Tavistock Institute. These psychologists just playing around. What can we do with the human psyche to demoralize you and disconnect you further from who you actually are in your, you know, divine being? How far can we get you? And that's what all that stuff is. And it was a tragedy. But it's really sad. It's really demented, and it really just gets people away from who they are naturally. It's another layer of the onion. You know, I've talked about this metaphor of many times. It's always worth kind of circling back to it because it's important. Um, oh, RJ says the Twitter volume is way too low on YouTube. Okay, thank you for that, brother. So next speaker that comes in, we'll make sure that we turn the volume up for. But yeah, these layers of the onion, you at the center, your divine spark of God, of creation, is in that center of the onion. And then from there, you've got your ego, and that has layers of itself, right? Your ego, and it can add more or less layers depending on how self-aware you are. But the ego is a layer. Then you get into your digital identity. Then you get into, and in no particular order here, right? But you get into the legal person. You get into all these other corporate jurisdictional traps that you get into. You add all these layers, and transgenderism is, oh, now my gender. It's like there's no such thing as gender. The feminists were right about that. There's no such thing as gender. There's only biological sex. What you call your gender is just like what you call the color of your hair. I could care less. If I can see you as a man, I'm going to treat you as a man. If I can see you as a woman, I'll treat you as a woman. Of course, being polite along the way too. But hey, Truth Farmer's back in the house here. Truth Farmer is a regular caller, and he's always got something interesting to say. What's up, brother?
Hey, Curtis, how you doing tonight?
Right on, dude. How are you doing?
I'm having some warm weather. It's posted like
+9 the last few days, and kind of a white Christmas so far out here in PEI. So
Not a white Christmas. Yeah, same here, dude. Same here. We've had this crazy warm winter. All my snow is slush right now. I just want another big dump because there's nothing better than a white Christmas.
yeah, I hooked up a little rig I got from, I think it's called Freeze Mister. I don't know, people might have heard of it, and it's got like a little ball bearing in there. And as it gets cold, the ball bearing drops down in the chamber.
Okay.
And the flow. So it warms up, the ball bearing comes back up, shuts off the chamber. So
it doesn't
it's been
freeze.
great. I had to get it in the garden hose. Filled it up because it was too warm for that thing to come on and off, you know?
Wow.
Kind of crazy for December.
Dude, what's that thing called? I got to write that down. That's slick.
It's I think it's called Freeze Mister.
Freeze Mister. And it's a type of valve?
Yeah, there's all kinds of videos on YouTube about them with a lot of ranchers and stuff use them, and it's a little valve that goes on the end of your garden hose.
Okay.
We've got a room in the barn where we have a light bulb at the top that keeps the water from freezing where it comes in from the well.
Okay.
Or trough where the cattle can drink all winter. It just trickles on and off all day, like it just.
Oh, is it free? Is it Freeze Miser, not Freeze Mister?
Yeah.
Freeze Miser. Okay. Okay, I got it here. Wow, yeah. Isn't that cool? Yeah.
Yeah, it works great.
I'm looking at it here on Amazon. I'm just sharing the link on the, I'm just sharing my screen. Yeah, that's a great idea, especially when you want to keep water flowing. I mean, it probably gets to a point where, you know, at -20, this probably isn't going to be much help, but.
You get that cold here.
No, yeah, you guys in the Atlantic areas don't get that cold, eh? What is the coldest you get?
So we get like -15, 16.
Yeah.
For a few days at most, and it gets back up to like -10, something like that.
But you do get tons of snow, right?
Yeah, not as much as they get in Ontario. The problem here is we have so much wind, and you know, we used to farm in Ontario. The snow comes from the sky straight down. Here it comes in sideways. We usually get snow when it's windy here.
Right.
It's very rare to get snow when it's not windy, and so snow tends to pile up here. So you'll have spots on your farm where there's like grass showing, and then you'll have a 4-foot snowbank in another spot, you know?
Right.
So
yeah.
So
yeah.
So it's cool. But yeah, no, great space, good conversation, and yeah, great to see everybody here tonight. And these conversations are so important, you know. It's really, really important. I just want to put a little plug out there. I have a buddy in Ontario, Glen Colton Farms, Michael Schmidt, raw milk guy.
Yep.
He's been battling for 25 years with the government over raw milk, and he just put on his big Christmas market. If you get a chance, check it out. It's just amazing. His farm, all the buildings are built out of wood. They're all timber frame buildings on the whole farm.
Nice.
Some are 100 years old. Some of them are 10 years old. And,
nice.
But he has this Kris Kringle market there for the Waldorf School fundraiser at the farm every year. And it is just amazing. Like, it's just awe-inspiring what they put on there and events and stuff like that, you know? So
love it.
It's great to see that the culture in agriculture.
Yes. The culture is a very important part of that's a whole rabbit hole there, brother. I mean, yeah, you know, the culture has been removed from agriculture. I think most of us are trying to bring it back, right, in some way or another, but you know, industrial farming, the Green Revolution, that all took the culture out of agriculture, and it just became agribusiness, right? Yep.
Right. I grew up as a young kid involved with 4-H, junior farmers, all these organizations, and they've really gone to the wayside, and it's a shame because, you know, organizations like junior farmers are such an amazing opportunity for young people to get skills and converse with other people, learn how to interact, you know, run little meetings with, like, you know, teenagers running their own little meetings with direction from leadership. Like,
yeah, good stuff. Really?
Up, you know?
Yeah. So wait. Did you grow up in the States? Isn't that an American thing?
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Groups, every group's got its own leadership that volunteers to run it.
Uh-huh.
And the whole premise is you have to have like half a dozen meetings over, throughout the winter or the summer, whatever it is. And we had a group. We had the maple syrup club. We had the farm machinery club. We had the swine, the sheep, the cattle clubs, farm finance, ecological farm, the environmental farm planning club. So there's a lot of stuff that's really cool stuff going on, and people can just start a chapter like in their own little community. They just get a hold of 4-H Canada, say, hey, we want to set up a little club here, and they provide you with all the handout information and stuff, a little like booklets and stuff, the guides and stuff.
Yep, yep.
It's amazing. It's really what it is. It's a kind of organization where you can direct it to be what you want it to be. So they'll give you, the study guides and stuff, but you choose, who the speakers are. You choose the direction. You choose the farm tours you go on. So it really gives, each club is unique. They're no two the same. They're not cookie cutter.
Right.
You could have two groups both having a livestock club, and they could be totally different.
Yes.
So
Yeah, yeah.
it's really, it's very independent. There's a hierarchy at the high level that sends out the information and the signs that says, a 4-H club member lives here and all that kind of stuff. But then at the local level, it's totally grassroots, So
Love it.
yeah, it's great for young families and people, kids and stuff,
Yeah,
So
that's great. You always bring cool stuff, brother. So I appreciate it.
yeah, awesome. Well, good to hear you. I'm gonna meet up here, but glad to be here tonight.
Yeah, thanks for showing up.
Thanks.
Yeah, so sorry, folks, on the YouTube end, some people saying it was clipping when I was talking, and yeah, probably because if we were overlapping a bit, there might have been just might have maxed out a little bit there. So yeah, I mean, I don't think I'll go too much longer here, folks, but I'll see what some of you guys are saying in the chats here. And I think this has been a pretty cool stream / space. So yeah, another reminder about that event that I'm doing, that sort of private event in Christian Valley, BC on New Year's on the it's the Saturday and Sunday of that weekend, the 30th and the 31st. There's events on both days. I'm only going to be there on the 31st. So I'll be there all day on Sunday the 31st, and then I don't know how late I'll be hanging out, people partying until New Year's. I mean, I've never been a New Year's guy. But I'll be there. I'll be crashing there. They got a place for me to stay, so I'm going to stay the night there. And I think there'll be like a breakfast in the morning or something like that. So that's free. You only have to pay if you want some accommodation. And they have all kinds of different accommodation out there, but you can even just go for the day and then go back home if you live in the area. So just message me at go to the urbanfarmer.co and go to the contact form there. Just I don't want to paste my email all over YouTube. And then just ask me and I'll send you the form. There's a form. It's just a little Google form saying this is what's going on. It doesn't say anything about the speakers or anything. I'm not on there, but I will be there. And yeah, you can check it out. You can come if you want to come and hang out and shoot the breeze with me on New Year's Eve. And yeah, we'll have a good time. Yeah, okay. I think we've got that sorted out. So anyways, folks, if anybody wants to chime in, request to speak, please do. Otherwise, I'll look at a few more questions and then we'll shut her down. So this is kind of cool to do spaces with YouTube because I get to stack functions and I don't have to stream as long. I mean, but I could technically. So I could do a 4-hour space and a 4-hour YouTube stream at the same time. Kind of a win-win. Mute. Hey, thanks for the $10, brother or sister, whoever you are. Just tipping the talker. Love it. Much appreciated. Can you give some inside perspective on how the AI notice idea would impact medium or large corporations? Good question. Well, it could be an enabler or it could be a disabler. It could be an enabler in that if
a corporation or a business wanted to find some legal remedy by serving notice or even just general administrative processes, AI is going to be able to do that for them. And I'm sure AI is doing all kind of administrative processes within companies right now. I'm sure, half the jobs at Twitter now are AI. Um, and on, and so, yeah, it's going to affect everybody. And the thing that's so kind of crazy about AI is that it's almost, in my opinion, it's an inevitability that it's going to get to a point where there's going to be something big that'll happen with it. I don't know if I believe in this idea of the singularity, in the sense that the idea of the singularity is that AI can self-replicate and grow itself so quickly that it becomes omnipresent, and then basically it can do anything so much faster than humans that humans almost immediately become redundant or in the way. And so I don't know if I can see that happening realistically, in the sense that I don't actually know if AI can replace the human mind, because the AI is not actually conscious like we are. It doesn't have free will in this. It's bound by algorithm. It's bound by design. So AI is going to, and you can see this already in AI. If you use Chat GPT, it's woke. If you ask it if a man can have a baby, it says yes. So it's woke. So it's bound by its algorithmic programming. So whereas if you're expecting some real omnipresent AI that's super intelligent, you think that it could see through bullshit. Like, can a man have a baby? Uh, Surely an AI that's intelligent and has free will would be able to use its own discernment to call a spade, but it can't. At least from what we can experience. I'm sure there's all kinds of developments in AI in the deep state, and beyond what's publicly available that would blow our minds. But at least from what we can experience, that seems to be the limitations of it. So I don't fear it in that way, but I think, yeah, I wonder where it'll get to a point where, how in technology, what seems to happen is that uh, after a certain point, after a certain iteration, it becomes really disseminated. So, case in point, one example would be um, white label services online, or uh, affiliate marketed fulfillment centers, things that were used to be mutually exclusive or exclusive to a particular company or creator, say Facebook, a social media platform, or MySpace, were exclusive to the creator. Then you get white label things like Buddy Boss, where you can create a social media platform and put whatever label you want on it. There's all kinds of things like that. Or how you can do Amazon fulfillment. So you can start a small business on Amazon, and then just all you have to do is sell online clicks, and the stuff gets handled. So you don't have to have any bricks and mortar. So case in point is that technology has a tendency to start at this top tier where its availability is exclusive to a particular corporate provider. Then further iterations come along and make it more usable within niche markets. So I would make the case, if you can agree that that is a trend that's happened in technology, it's most likely going to happen in AI at some point, where somebody else is going to come along and create a white, and maybe I'm giving all kinds of ideas for AI creators. Somebody will come along and make a white label AI where you say, give me all the context and confines of a particular subject matter, and say a particular understanding of a subject, and I will write script or language or text based on the perimeters of that. And so, like I said earlier, how neat would it be if I could have an AI, if I could train an AI with the framework of understanding of the legal statute system as so not to train it as a lawyer, because lawyers are just compartmentalized legal idiots. And some of them have the best of intentions, but some of them don't. But they are compartmentalized in that lawyers who understand a particular form of law, whether it's mergers and acquisitions, licensing, court, prosecution, defense, you name it. There's all kinds of lawyers out there. They're totally compartmentalized within their jurisdictional framework. So what lawyers understand is procedure. They just understand procedure within the jurisdictional capacity that their flavor of law practices. I think most lawyers would probably agree with that. I have never really had a conversation with a lawyer. Well, kind of I have, but gone really deep with big picture stuff. They just don't go there. They just understand the micro of the procedure that they need to follow for this thing, this contract, this ordinance, whatever it is. They just understand that. They're completely compartmentalized into their specialized field. And that's all by design. The lawyers, if you meet any lawyers that are really, really red pilled, say for lack of a better term, they don't practice. They're not in the bar anymore. They just do their own thing. And those people exist and they're out there. So, yeah. Eldan says law is basically some human constrained application of derivative conclusions. Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. A friend of mine had a really cool I'd like to get him on the show at some point. I don't know if he will want to. He's not a public guy, but he is an interesting dude. I've got a friend who has a really interesting background. He's about 20 years older than me. Bitcoin guy, did very well with Bitcoin, international traveler, really interesting guy. Has done all kinds of stuff in his career. But he has this story that he likes to tell where he talks about how he was a high level corporate auditor, and he worked in the energy sector, and he worked for some of the biggest corporations in the world doing corporate audits, basically just paper trails, and he got red pilled in the paperwork. And his story I found so compelling because it compared to mine, in that I actually got red pilled in the paperwork too. I got red pilled with learning about the Federal Reserve and all that stuff, but when I really went to the next level of my understanding of how the system works, it came straight out of the paperwork, straight out of the law. And my friend, his story is he was a high level corporate auditor who worked for billion-dollar companies and would do very expensive accounting. And he told me that in 2006, 2007, 2008, he just started to really notice what how he articulates it. Is he said, as an auditor and as an accountant, he had built a foundation in his career of understanding fundamentals in accounting, fundamental practices in accounting that you followed to get to the proper procedure for an audit. You have to have these fundamentals you follow. And he said he started to notice in these years that there was all this practice in accounting happening. And I've seen, this is what I also witness in the law, is you exchange fundamentals for technicalities. And it's almost the same analogy. It's analogous to the idea of lawful to legal, or republic to democracy. And it's a dichotomy, right? But it is interesting to think about things this way. And he says that he started to observe that all these companies were just doing this sketchy accounting, and he started to go deeper. And he's the kind of guy that really researches things and just looks for answers. And he just found all these sketchy accounting practices that people were doing all of a sudden that were just allowed. I think it might have came out of the Dodd-Frank thing. It might be in the US when they changed. Was it Dodd-Frank? The thing with I forget how that worked, but it doesn't really matter. It's not that important to the point. But he noticed all these things, and then he started to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And then he found across the board that when he looked at the system, no matter how you encountered it, whether it was accounting and corporate finance and audits and paper trails, or it was the law, or it was just administrative practice within the state. He found that there was a consistent trend of sacrificing fundamentals for technicalities. And, one example of this would be fundamentals in law versus technicalities in the legal system. So, for example, uh, fundamentals in, say, law, when you think about equity, talk about uh, the maxims of equity coming out of Roman civil law that created the foundation of Western law as we know it today. But prior to that, the Bible was the foundation. And then the Holy Roman Empire changed law, had all these fundamentals. Then, so you could take, say, a book like the Maxims of Equity, which is about this thick, and it's got hundreds of these maxims of equity. 12 of them are primarily used in Western law, but there's all these fundamentals. Then you take that to the book of ordinances on the municipal level or the regional level or the county level of any local government. And you couldn't even fill this room. Like you'd fill more than this room. And so that's an example of technicalities, because now we're creating things on top of a foundation of law. It's where you get this idea, or what's said in law with the Bar Association is the Bar Association says that we practice color of law. So you have law, and then you have color of law. They're two different things. One is not the same, but one came from a foundation. And so, anyways, his story of how accounting practices became that way, I found was fascinating, because I observed the same things in the system, is that we sacrifice fundamentals for technicalities, and it's the technicalities that trick you. And so the government and the state will play this game where they'll trick you into a jurisdictional trap by throwing some technicalities at you. But if you understand fundamentals, you can supersede those technicalities, because the fundamentals are the foundation of law, which all of this stuff is the color of. It's not the law, it's the color of law. And when you get, tricked into their games, you submit to their jurisdictional power, and then you're essentially paying somebody to administer you and the things that the day-to-day things that you do. You're basically being asked to be administrated. And it's a racket. And in a way, the government does it on so many levels that most people would just have no idea. You don't even know how administered you are. People have no idea. But everything you've ever signed your name to in your life is a contract, and you've agreed to go along with certain terms and conditions. And it was all disclosed to you at the beginning. But most likely, you didn't read that booklet about this thick that was the terms and conditions. So it's the same thing in your software that you download, and there's multi-page PDF of terms and conditions that you didn't read, as it is with any other legal matter that's brought to your attention. It's all the same. It's all the same. And if you don't read the terms and conditions, you're going to potentially run into issues where you're going to get yourself in above your head, and you don't know what's going on, and you're swimming in the holy sea, and you're lost at sea, and you become a wayward traveler, and you don't know where the hell you are. And that's, I think, where the vast majority of people are today. That when this New World Order continues to get more and more realized and becomes more and more visible in our day-to-day life, people are going to become that much more disconnected, because it's almost like the analogy of the fundamentals versus technicalities is also the analogy of the layers of the onion that get you further from the truth. So I have that metaphor of the middle of the onion is the core, it's the spirit, it's who you are. Then you add the layer of your biological sex is a layer, your ego is a layer, your personality in its many nuanced ways is a layer, and so on and so forth. All these layers to your social media account, to your legal person, what have you, is that all of these it happens in the same way, that you get lost in the details. And it's almost what color of law is that color of law is all these layers of an onion. And then, and if you go and you want to be, say, a legislator, or you want to be some kind of administrator in the state, or some kind of law firm or whatever, you're dealing with mountains of paperwork and codes and ordinances, and there's no way in your life you could know it all, because none of it really applies to fundamentals. But if you understand the fundamentals, and you understand that certain things can be done and cannot be done at the jurisdictional level, which is above that jurisdictional level, then you can supersede pretty much all of it. And that's what's really empowering about learning that stuff, and taking the time to actually read the law, because that's what it is. Yeah, somebody's like, yeah, I'm not referring to social equity. I was talking about equity in law. It's not equity in social justice. It's not equity in what I talk about, social equity in relationships, social capital. Equity in law is the foundation of Western law. It's called maxims of equity. Maxims, maxims of equity. And you can go maxims are essentially foundational principles within a certain subject as a maxim. And so there's maxims. If you look at words and definitions of words in the law, and even in just common English or whatever language, there's maxims of words. What's the root of that word? And it often has a Latin foundation. And so you can look at the Latin foundation of words, or the Latin maxim of words. That's how I found out the actual definition of includes, because it's actually kind of hard to find a definition of includes that really tells you what includes means. So I've talked about the word includes many times in these streams, but includes in legal terms means that and only that. The exclusion of one is the exclusion of everything else. So if I say to you, excuse me, if I say to you that I'm having some friends over for dinner, and dinner includes ice cream and an Oreo cookie, what I said legally is that dinner only includes ice cream and an Oreo cookie. Whereas in common parlance, if I said I'm having a dinner party and it includes some ice cream and a cookie, you would assume that I meant there's a dinner plus a cookie and some ice cream. But that's not what I said legally. And that's why corporations, you see this in corporate advertising on television. I started to notice this 20 years ago, is that they'll say symptoms include blah, 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 or things like that. Corporations know this shit, and they'll use that term very sparingly and very intentionally, and they'll trick you into all kinds of stuff because you assumed. And that's what they do in law, is that they want you to fill in the blanks. They want you to make the assumption. That way they're not liable. That way they exclude themselves. So, another funny example is if you look up the definition of accident in the Motor Vehicles Act of British Columbia. Accident, the definition says, an accident includes an intentional collision. So what did I just tell you? Well, I told you that an accident only includes an intentional collision, because you have to ask the fundamental question logically. Well, why wouldn't they just say otherwise? Why, if an accident legitimately included an intentional and unintentional collision, it's not like they're vying for space in the definitions of the document. It's not like words are at an all-time prime value in real estate and we just can't afford the word space. There's no logical reason that definition shouldn't read an accident includes an intentional and unintentional collision. Why wouldn't it say that? But it doesn't. It just says an accident includes an intentional collision. Why? Right? It's just like the definition of Canada, where it says for greater certainty, Canada includes, and every time it says Canada, it says it in brackets, which means it's called the Four Corners rule in law. It means that that's actually excluded because there is no Canada. And so Canada includes the internal and territorial waters within the landmass known as Canada. That's almost a verbatim definition. Go look it up if you don't believe me. Interpretations Act of Canada. That's the definition of this country of Canada. You can also look in that same act and look up what the definition of a province is. And it doesn't include any of the provinces. It only includes the territories and none of it. So it says a province in Canada includes Northwest Territories, Yukon Territories, and none of it. It doesn't say BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, New Brunswick, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't say that. Why? Why wouldn't it say it? That's the question you have to ask yourself. It doesn't say it because it's not included. And that's intentional. Because this whole thing is this whole dog and pony show is basically a matrix of words and paper. And they're expecting that you're going to get mixed up in the mess of it all. And it's easy to do so if you don't know the fundamentals. If you get caught up in the technicalities, as my friend says, you're swimming in a sea of nebulous terms and definitions that you just don't understand. And you don't want to understand because you just go, give it to a lawyer, or just do whatever they do whatever you will do. I'll agree. Salam says, Curtis, it might also mean something having to do with desert, since ice cream and cookies are, dessert, since ice cream and cookies are both sweets / dessert. So it might also include a piece of cake. It might. It might. Salam's got lots of good stuff to say here. Maxims are to law what atoms are to chemistry. I love that. That's a t-shirt slogan there, brother. I love that. And that's very that's absolutely correct. I've observed that in my own experience with all this stuff, is that's exactly what it is. It's a form of jurisprudence. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. El Dan says you have to appeal to the higher authority to avoid getting sucked into the bureaucracy. Denise Mathieu says, what happens when they figure out that AI robots don't go out to spend money on Saturday night? Well, that is the question. That is the question, because it does all come back down to money. And I think that in a way ties into what I was talking about earlier, how I could see AI going into this level where we go into this massive depression because it creates such an abundance of content that there's no market for. Because, well, for one, people are hurting, people don't have money. And two, there's AI can replicate and make stuff. Like, it's almost at a point, AI, where you can give it a screenplay for a Hollywood movie and it could just make the movie. It's almost there. Like, I'm watching on InfoWars, even Alex Jones they've got all these crazy videos now where you would not have been able to produce this stuff even 2 years ago, with these crazy fantasy type scenarios where Alex Jones is a knight, and it's kind of funny, and it's pretty cool content. I mean, shit, when could you have ever done that without an animation crew and a bunch of people in post production? And my goodness, I mean, I've been involved in the music industry for many years, and I know what production looks like on the video end as well, being an editing, doing content and all that. It's a lot to make content, and with this technology, it's crazy. So yes, to the point that Denise made, what happens when you don't go out and spend money on Saturday night? Exactly. People aren't making money. There's all this appearance of people making money online because there's all this stuff flying at you, offers left, right, and center, and the kind of hidden part of the economy. It's not that hidden, actually, but a big part of the economy today that people don't talk about that often is the metadata harvesting. That's how most of these companies are monetizing. It's a big part of how Amazon became such a powerhouse without making a profit for so many years, same as Google, is that they were just harvesting massive amounts of consumer habit data, basically. So much to the point that Amazon can predict what you want next. Like, how insane is that? And it's got a distribution center that's got that thing for you before you even know you want it. And so that's where that, and that's a lot of AI in that too. Maybe a bit more of a prehistoric version of it, if you will, in today's context. But that's there. And so that's a big part of this AI play that's going to be crazy, and it's going to lead to, in my opinion, a content depression in a way, because there's going to be so much content for so long offered for so cheap that it's just not valuable anymore. It's still valuable right now because the people that are utilizing it we're in this new territory, and it's not mass adopted yet, and it hasn't been totally automated, though it's getting there very quickly, and there's a ton of automation already. But AIs aren't writing the scripts. I mean, AIs are writing the scripts, but they're writing the scripts under command of an individual that's asking it. But once AI starts to write the scripts and the level of management is needed less and less, the amount of content that's going to come out is just going to be flabbergasting. And I think a lot of people aren't ready for it. And I think what's going to happen is it's going to be one of these things that's going to lead a mass exodus of call it the neo-Luddites. It's like they use that term in that movie Transcendence. I thought that was quite fitting. Is the neo-Luddites? They're the people that are saying no, technology should stop at a certain point, and we're not going to join the Borg and plug into the AI. We're going to get out of it. And I don't want to give the movie away. It's actually a pretty good Hollywood dystopian sort of Hollywood movie that might be worth watching if you haven't seen it. But yeah, on Denise's point, absolutely. I totally agree. Chris says, is it money or power? If AI does such a good job and replaces all labor, what good is money? Everyone could have whatever they want as long as it isn't scarce. I agree with you, but AI is not producing labor, not reproducing labor yet. It's reproducing digital labor and digital content creation, but it's not replacing labor. That's going to be a long, even Elon Musk, who's got that new robot thing out, is saying it's going to be at least 10 years until this is really replacing people. There's still a long ways out. So, but I think we could be at an interesting turning point here in our collective experiences, that this is going to create a whole bunch of new market circumstances and, hurdles and problems and solutions too. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. AI can steal content. Exactly. It can steal content, and that's what it'll do. Like, it could get to a point where it could just replicate me. Like, AI, and there'll be a market solution for this too, right? And that's where this digital ID thing will probably fit into it, in my opinion, is that on top of an economic collapse or a cyber pandemic, as they call it in the SPARS pandemic document that the WEF and the Rockefeller Foundation published a few years ago, where they talk about that. And that's kind of this hypothesis partly of that movie, Leave the World Behind. But you have that kind of scenario, and then you have a different type of scenario where there's just an absolute economic fallout from the fact that there's not enough people to buy this stuff. Says you're actually describing a communist observation with the AI's ability to produce. The observation is called the crisis of overproduction. Yes, it is. That's exactly right. It is the crisis of overproduction. That's exactly it. That's what Karl Marx actually wrote about in Das Kapital. Absolutely. Yes. And I'm not a communist, for the record. I'm sure most people know that. But yes, you're absolutely correct. It is. That's actually what communism predicted. But it didn't totally work out. Kind of did in some ways. Karl Marx was right about some things, right? Whether you like him or not, I don't like Karl Marx, because he's an aristocratic douchebag who is an entitled little shit who never had to work a day in his life. And then he had all these ideas about the working class, but he never worked a day in his life. Much like all the communists I know, all come from rich families and never had to work. But it's a sort of an ironic thing with communists. But Yeah, he was right about some things. He was right about capital concentrating up in the higher aristocracy. I mean, he's right. It's correct. It's true. It's an observation. But that's everything that subverts always has an element of truth in it. And if you read Tragedy and Hope, which every truther has to read Tragedy and Hope, sometimes I pressure people. And have you read that book? If you want to understand the New World Order, it's standard. It is the book to read. Tragedy and Hope is the book to start with. Or get the audiobook version, the Joseph Plummer, Tragedy and Hope for Dummies book or whatever. It's actually pretty good. But they talk about that and how in order to do all this stuff, everybody has to be incredibly compartmentalized. Otherwise, you can't pull this stuff off. And so, anyways, there are literally watermarks in AI pics. There is, and you can still tell everything. Like AI is still not fully convincing. But it's cool enough to be kind of taken away. Why you can just make a neat photo of yourself in an animation. It's like, wow, this is crazy. You would have had to produce this or have somebody draw this before, and it would have been really difficult to do. So, but now, yeah. Al says thoughts on whether they're all in on it together. You be more specific. What do you mean by that? I don't think what I actually, so I'll kind of assume what I think you're talking about, whether they're all in on it, is I don't think that, yeah, the theater of war. I think there's elements of truth to what you're saying. And you're not necessarily making that claim, but just in what you're saying, there's elements of truth of that. Is there's a lot of people in on it. It's like George Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it. There's no question about that. But I think for what a lot is actually happening is there is an internal struggle within the factions of the New World Order. And it's this proverbial idea that a movie like Game of Thrones really shows you very well or even Lord of the Rings is this struggle for the throne to the power. The struggle for the throne, the crown, whatever you want to call it, is that there is a lot of competing factions and they don't always agree. Like the Zionists don't always agree part and parcel with everything that the Anglo-American establishment wants to do. I think it's pretty easy to see that there are fractions being drawn as we get closer to this technocratic authoritarian realization, which I think a lot of the top level politicians and power brokers are thirsting with greed for, is that now they finally have this opportunity to you just listen to a guy like Noah Harari, Yuval Noah Harari, the guy who wrote the book Sapiens, and he also wrote the book Deuce, what's it called? Deuce Mios or something like that. It's man point two. He's the primary butt boy of Klaus Schwab and the good old boys at the World Economic Forum, but he's one of their sort of ideological henchmen that kind of march forward these ideas into the public lexicon that the technocrats are frothing at the mouth over, and people like us are sitting there going, "This is a nightmare scenario. This guy's fucking nuts. I want nothing to do with this asshole." But that as they realize how they can control people even better. Just look at how brainwashed people are compared to, say, the 1990s. I grew up in the 90s. I was born in 79 and I was a teenager in the 90s. And I couldn't even imagine back then. I was reading 1984 and Brave New World and all these dystopian sci-fi type books. I was really into fantasy novels and stuff too. But I thought about all these things, and I couldn't have imagined the amount of control that they have now. But the thing, again, going back to the problem is the solution, I always like to kind of bring it back full circle, is that it's so fascinating, at least in my observation, and you guys tell me what you think. Am I off on this? It seems to me that as this thing rolls out and this technocratic realization gets closer and closer and closer to be fully realized to what guys like Bertrand Russell and Sigmund Freud were fantasizing about 100 years ago. As it gets closer and closer to be realized, yes, the technocratic grip of control is ever more present. However, the way out seems easier and easier to take because the technocratic mechanisms of control through propaganda and just manipulation of the narrative in general become so painfully obvious. There's so many people here just going, "You're telling me men can have babies? You're telling me that and saying you're an expert, therefore I should trust your opinion, but I have my own eyes. And you're saying to me that I shouldn't believe my own lying eyes, but I should trust you." And so they did the same thing with COVID. They said, don't believe your lying eyes. Believe us, the experts. They did the same thing with the climate change narrative for the last 20 years. I've witnessed it and I was a part of it. And I played a part of that narrative and was a virtue signaling leftist climate change activist for many years. And I played into that. But after so many years of unfulfilled promises of the ice caps melting, I started to go, wait a second, you're telling me one thing, but I'm just not seeing it. I've been down to the Port of Vancouver, almost every year of my life since I was a 12-year-old boy, and the sea level hasn't changed there. I've been to the Statue of Liberty a few times. I've never seen the water level change. I've been to the St. Lawrence River. I've been to all these monuments that connect to the ocean, and I've never seen a change. And so it's this whole thing of what they're telling you. The more you kind of get red pilled and the more you realize how everything they say is a lie, the easier it is to see, if that makes sense. So tell me what you guys think. I mean, am I off on that? Am I right on that? Give me a hell yes or a yes or a like on the space or the stream and tell me what you think. But it just seems to me that it gets easier. And then that's where I evaluate my own personal context and my own experience with what I've done in my world. And as I say, I go back to this thing of the New World Order is going to get more and more entrenched in our lives, but it's a life and an offer of convenience. And if you're willing to not take the convenient path and take a path that's a little bit harder, a little bit more responsibility, a little bit more work, and it gets easier as you do it. As you get better, you do these things easier, and it becomes you do it with less effort going forward. That we don't have to go along with any of this, and a lot of people push back on me at this, and I get why. And maybe if some of you folks want to come down to this event in the Christian Valley and on New Year's Eve, again, go to the urbanfarmer.co and just message me there in the contact form, and I'll send you an invite form for it. But we'll get into maybe a bit more there, and I might riff on that a bit in my public talk, and we'll have time for Q&A, and I'll be hanging out with people too, and we can bullshit and stuff. But I look at the things that I've done in my life, and I've never failed at any of this stuff. Anytime I've got a letter, I've been able to write a letter back and get what I want out of the situation. And I sit here and I'm going, everybody's saying that it's all fucked. But when I look around and I observe who's saying that, it's everybody who's playing a political game, in that they're a talking head promoting algorithmically favorable content that speaks to the public narrative of political discussion. It's why guys like Tim Pool are very popular. And I don't really have a problem with Tim Pool. I like Tim Pool. I think he's all right. But what Tim Pool has done is he's figured out how to do the YouTube algorithm, like full on. His channel is unbelievably successful. I hear he makes like $500,000 a month, and I'm not surprised. But that's sure, I'd like to make that kind of money, but I just don't care to just talk about algorithmically positive content, because I just find it mind-numbingly boring because it's just talking about band-aid things, not fundamentals. Again, technicalities versus fundamentals, republic versus democracy, lawful maxims of equity versus color of law, statute law. Same idea. Is the system favors in every way, whether it's algorithms on YouTube, Google, anything online, in the mainstream media, in the public lexicon, everybody favors technicalities over fundamentals, because they're more fun to talk about, I guess. And I guess just for me, I'm just going like, well, there's no remedy in that. And I but that doesn't sell. And so that's just the reality of it. It doesn't get clicks. And so nobody talks about fundamentals. They talk about the latest thing Kanye West said, or the latest thing that the latest Trump thing, or the latest Elon Musk thing. Elon Musk is a pariah just as much as Donald Trump is. It's just another orange man bad. It's just another individual, like Saul Alinsky wrote about in his book Rules for Radicals, is get people focused on an effigy, create an effigy and burn the effigy. And so they put up all these straw men and they want you to dance around the straw man. And that's the game. It's like Plato's cave is all the fancy drawings and the shadows in the cave. Look at the shadows, don't look at the hands. Again, fundamentals versus technicalities. Lawful for the written word of God in the Bible versus the legal statute law system, which is color of law versus technicalities versus and a legal system. So you can find these parallels on anything. It's actually quite an interesting thought process to go through, but yeah, that's kind of my thinking on that. Elle says you're on point with this convenience thing. Well, thank you. To avoid convenience, we should promote nudism. Maybe in some circles. What about to the 18-year-old ones who have no family and no money and they're starting out? You know what? We had a great caller last week on the space. So you guys in YouTube, unless you went into Twitter and listened to the space, you would have missed it. But we had a great caller, young man, 22 years old. Forget his name. He was out of somewhere Southern Ontario, Windsor, I believe. He called in and we had Ben Falk on the call there. Ben and I were just talking about homesteading stuff and firewood primarily, but kind of getting to some macro issues too. But he called in and asked the same question. He said, I'm a young guy. I don't have a lot of capital. I'm looking at the New World Order. I'm looking at this stuff. What should I do? And I said, you know what? I got two things for you. I said, the first thing is work with your hands. First of all, get a job doing something that is bar none needed. So, of course, I've always advocated for young men to get into farming, of course. But I would actually even say more, and I said this to him on the call last week, is that I would even consider getting into bush work, depending on where you want to be. I mean, if you're living in a peri-urban farming area, farming is there's going to be farm jobs there, but you'll make a lot more money working in the bush. And I worked in the bush 10 years prior to me getting into farming. I was a bush worker. I worked in silviculture and was a tree planter. And I did other bush work too. I did a bit of chainsaw work, and I do a ton of chainsaw work now. But I've worked in and around the bush for almost my entire adult life in some way or another. And bush work is actually really great for a young man. You can get into being a faller. You can do a firewood business. You could be a heavy equipment operator, work in the bush, work on logging crews, whatnot. You'll make hundreds of dollars a day doing bush work. Tree planting, I mean, I used to make $500 to $700 a day tree planting, and apparently the tree planters today make that same amount of money adjusted for inflation, which is unfortunate, but still $500 to $700 a day isn't bad for a day's work. So I say to young guys, Do physical work. Find, and this is what we told that caller, find other men who are willing to mentor you, and you would be amazed on how many older men want to mentor young men, because so many few people don't want to do this work anymore. Find a mentor, get into some kind of trade, work with your hands, carpentry, electrical, plumbing, you name it. I got a buddy doing plumbing. He's crushing, making $50 an hour, and he's still an apprentice, and he's making $50 an hour because he bought the tools. And his boss said, man, I'll pay you like a full journeyman because you got the tools. So own it, take responsibility, work with your hands. Forget doing stuff online, honestly, because it's going to disappear. It's going to be so undervalued soon that working with your hands is going to be prime. So the next thing is save in Bitcoin. So the way to get rich online, the easy way is to just save any earnings you can in Bitcoin. And I say Bitcoin over precious metals because, and this triggers some people in the truth space. And I get it, but I mean, I've been buying precious metals for 24 years. Okay. I'm not kidding you. I bought my first ounce of gold when I was 20 years old on the advice of my dad. I saved up, I don't know what it would have been at the time, $700 or something like that to Canadian to buy an ounce of gold. Bought an ounce of gold. And then just over the years, bought an ounce of silver. When I could afford an ounce of gold, I'd buy an ounce of gold. Bought a lot of silver. And I didn't get into Bitcoin in 2014 when I should have, because if I did, I would be a multimillionaire now, but I didn't. I didn't get really in until 2019, maybe 2020. But I have made more in my earnings in Bitcoin in a fifth of the time, a fifth of the amortization period. I have made more on my earnings in Bitcoin than I ever did on precious metals on way less invested. And so the great thing about Bitcoin is it's so much more transferable and liquid. Precious metals are clunky, and you often need to have more to get in on precious metals because, well, you can buy an ounce of silver, right? Okay. But you need to have some ounces of silver in order for it to be meaningful. But they're heavy. Once you start buying monster boxes of silver, it's heavy. It weighs like 50 pounds. And so gold less so, but it's hard to get in with gold because the units aren't as divisible. Whereas Bitcoin is so divisible and is on a consistent trajectory up over time. And if you can play the long game, I would say to any young man, don't even consider a savings account. Buy Bitcoin in cash and keep it on a hard wallet, and have multiple hard wallets. There's nothing wrong with having multiple hard wallets. And just put them away. So every paycheck, get cash, go to a cash dealer who sells Bitcoin. Most gold and silver shops sell Bitcoin now. So you can go, and the reason for this is just the hard truth of it. Not happy to say it, but it's just the truth, is drug dealers need a place to save money, and they don't save money in the bank. So Bitcoin is the biggest servicer of the black market. I mean, not really. I'm sure the US dollar is still far higher in its market capitalization in the black market than Bitcoin, because, we all know about Pablo Escobar, who had, mountains of cash, US dollars stored. It's like, to make the case that Bitcoin is mutually exclusive to criminals is a ridiculous argument that doesn't stand any test of logic. But it is the reality that Bitcoin, you should buy Bitcoin in cash, because if you go onto the exchanges, they're risky. And if you only buy Bitcoin in cash, and you can have multiple accounts, you can have multiple wallets, however many you want. You might want one wallet that has a KYC that you use on. KYC is know your customer. You might want one wallet that you use on the exchange, and there's a KYC there and whatever as a paper trail, or you and have another wallet that's just cash. So you're a young guy working in the bush, and you're making $1,000, couple $1,000 a week. Take $100 and buy Bitcoin. Don't even care about the price. If you just play a long game, and you set a target and say, every paycheck or whatever it is, I'm going to buy this amount, $100 in Bitcoin every time. If you do that consistently, every paycheck for years, By the time you're in your mid 30s, you will be a millionaire. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. So if I was a young man, that's what I'd be doing. I'd be working in the bush. I'd be doing chainsaw work. I'd be learning basic mechanics. I'd be learning basic carpentry. Carpentry is a great skill to start with. I'd be doing concrete forming. I mean, I'm doing all this stuff now too. I'm getting to learn it later in my life, which is fun and exciting. I get to work with young guys too, and I'll often learn a lot from them. But yeah, that's what I would do. That's what I say for young guys is just save in Bitcoin and buy a bit of precious metals every now and then too, but don't expect the returns you're going to get in Bitcoin. You won't see it. Metals are so suppressed. And Bitcoin could be that too eventually once the ETF market comes in, once the next halvening happens with Bitcoin, that might happen. At the same time, when you look at the lifetime chart of Bitcoin, it just goes like this. And yeah, it's like this, right? So it just peaked at 60,000 Canadian last week, and then it went back down to 54. But it's up from 25. It was at 25,000 just this summer. And now it went up to 60. Now it's kind of settling. And so some guys I know in the game who really know Bitcoin think that there's going to, once the ETF and the next halvening happens with Bitcoin, if you don't know what the halvening is, just look it up. I'm not going to spend too much time educating on everybody on Bitcoin. There's tons of content out there to do that for you. That all the smart money is going to sell when it hits its new high at like 85,000 or something. And then it's going to just hit the floor, maybe go as low as 20 or 10,000 again, which would be a great buying opportunity. And then it'll go back up to a new high and maybe they'll settle at, it'll go up to 200,000. Then it'll go drop down to 80,000. It could settle there. And so that's what you notice. If you look at just the lifetime chart of Bitcoin, it does that. It hits these peaks and then it goes back down. But then if you look at the tops of the peaks, it keeps setting these new averages, these new midpoints. So that's what I would say to young guys: save in Bitcoin. Don't put any money in the bank. Put money in the bank that you need to pay your bills. And that's it. Save everything else in Bitcoin and be prepared to just put money into that savings account for 10 years, 20 years, just like you would have done with an IRA or an RRSP in Canada. Do the same thing. But those IRAs and RSPs are BS scams. I don't have any money invested in the traditional economy anymore. I'm all in crypto and assets and metals and things like that. And now biological capital, which is great. Buy the hype, sell the news. Love that, RJ. Can you memorize your Bitcoin key in your head? No, I can't. But yeah, could be a good thing to do. JNYC, any particular Bitcoin? Yeah, just normal Bitcoin. I mean, I think they're all, whenever they haven, it's all the same thing as far as I know. I buy BTC and it all goes into the same wallet because it's all set up for that same BTC. So that's all I can say to that. One guy I'm really enjoying, a Canadian guy, BTC Sessions. I like this guy. He's got this really cool, positive attitude. You know what's really interesting? An observation you might agree with or disagree with is if you've been into the money space for a long time, and by that I just mean listening to guys who are Austrian economics guys, and I've been listening to these guys for a long time. Even before I was fully red pilled about all this stuff, I'd been listening to Peter Schiff and Gerald Celente for so long. Even Max Kaiser, even before he got into Bitcoin. Precious metals people are really really obsessed with the shit hitting the fan, and precious metals are being the all-time value of how you get through Mad Max world. Okay, and the Bitcoin book and maybe a previous stream. I really, really like that book. And that's kind of the future that we're going into. So it's kind of, there's these two different opinions and everything in between, of course. But it is interesting, and I like both of those spaces. I like the metals space. I like the metals guys. I still like Peter Schiff, though. He's been so wrong on gold so wrong on BTC for so long that it's almost painful to watch. But I still like him, and I still think he has some good points in some places. I can't expect everybody to be on the same page with me on everything, right? So I like people who have varying opinions on things. And but yeah, I find that interesting, the difference in overall the levels of optimism of Bitcoin people versus precious metals people is quite significant. Oh, it says my connection's a bit choppy. Well, maybe that's a good sign that we need to oh, it did. Oh, it says this. Yeah, it says this. How's it going in the space here, guys? Has this chopped out at all? Let me know, or give me that little 100% thing on your if this has been okay and it hasn't been glitching out. Let me know if that's been the case, because I can't say that I've been able to experience it one way or the other. Yeah, 100%. Okay, James says it's all good. People in the YouTube world see getting cut out. My apologies for that, folks. Not much I can do about it. I'm kind of at the mercy of Starlink here, but yeah. Anyways, folks, I'm going to I'm going to leave it here. We've gone on for 3.5 hours. I think this has been a good stream. I had a good time. Smash the like, share these streams if you like them. Let me know if you think who would make some good guests. I've got some good guests lined up coming in for Liberty on the Land talks, and we'll do that. Oh, here, you know what? We'll take one more call before we shut her down. And I see James here waiting. Larry says Bitcoiners are what? Oh, I just meant, oh, maybe it muted. I was just talking about how Bitcoiners are often a bit more optimistic than precious metals here. So we're going to bring in one more caller, and then we're going to shut her down for the night. Hey, James.
First time listener.
Right on.
In the stuff you're doing, I just wanted to kind of quickly touch on, like, what are your thoughts on all these greenies going around trying to limit farmers and, water intake, and trying to say that, like, cattle's more damaging?
Yeah, right.
Like cattle.
Yeah.
Like some sort of food shortage at some point.
Yes. No doubt about it. They're all compartmentalized idiots that are just doing something that they've been told is right. Oh, farming is bad, and cow farts are going to cause an existential crisis and climate change and all that ridiculousness. Yeah, they're just compartmentalized, but they're all pushing the New World Order agenda, which is Cloward and Piven. So the primary strategy that the New World Order has put into operation is called Cloward and Piven. And what Cloward and Piven is it was an idea that was brought forward by these left-wing radicals, Cloward and Piven. I only know Frances Fox Piven because I used to watch her videos when I was a lefty, and later got kind of red-pilled on how much of a communist she was and how crazy she was. But anyways, they came up with the strategy that the only way we can get communism is because there's no more working class that we can mobilize, because the working class are mostly conservative, so they're not going along with any of this stuff, is that we have to get people into all this kind of ideology, all this left-wing ideology, where it gets to that thing where it's what I said earlier, is the issue is not the issue is always revolution. But what Cloward and Piven does is they say, well, the only way to get communism is to manufacture a crisis and bring all sectors of the economy to their knees. And so that's literally what they're doing. That's why the dog and pony show in politics is an absolute joke. You sound like you're from Australia. Dan Andrews, total joke. Or Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, total joke. Justin Trudeau, total joke. Joe Biden, total joke. So crash politics, crash the administration of everything by just showing how it's all just a corrupt dog and pony show. then overregulate every sector of the economy, bring it to its needs, everything. Crash the economy, create false scarcity by just throttling commodity prices, all this bullshit. The environmentalists and all the greenies that you're talking about, they're all part of the exact same thing. They're just pawns on a chessboard that are implementing a program of scarcity through manufactured collapse. And that's all they're doing.
Yeah, I feel like they're trying to hit like simultaneously both the energy sector and the farming sector at once.
Yes.
Because especially in Australia right now, the power grid's barely holding together, and now they want us all to transition to EVs by 2030. It's like,
no way. And that's the point. And that's the point, dude, is it's not going to happen. And it's like what I said when I started this space, or what I posted on Twitter this morning, is that, I like EVs. I like them for some reasons, but for the most part, they're not going to work for people. It's just going to mean that most people aren't driving. So in the pursuit of getting everybody driving an EV, and the virtue signal of we're driving these to save the climate, is just going to mean that it's going to max out the energy grid that's already maxed out enough. And it's just going to it's going to decimate it. And then they're going to say, oh, look, now there's just not enough power around. Now you're going to need your social credit score in order to get enough kilometers on that car so that you can go to, FEMA District 5 or whatever it's going to be, right? That's exactly what they want. So it's all the same thing. It's just these guys, the New World Order is, this is why I talk about how there's sort of an internal struggle. Is it's this, they want the ring of power. Who's going to get the one ring to rule them all? And AI is going to be that thing. They're in pursuit of this AI to rule it all, and they're taking each other out. And that's why the propaganda is almost more convoluted now. Whereas like how the Israel-Palestine issue came in and it divided the right, it's because it's that the propaganda was meant to divide the people, but there's also major divisions going on in the upper ranks of the deep state and in the bureaucracy. And so, but at the end of the day, they just want to max all this shit out so that people are barely scraping by. And in that way, they'll be forced to take the digital gulag offer, which is to get into the digital identity and the digital ID, the CBDC, signing up for the universal basic income, all that shit. So,
CBDC, like they've been experimenting at cattle auctions here apparently with CBDC, and it's backed by the Reserve Bank, and like they're doing it as like a pilot run.
Oh yeah, yeah. Dude, I learned an interesting thing about Australia and New Zealand when I was on tour there a number of years ago, because I got to know some people that worked in the technology sector, and this pertains to the New World Order. But I met some people at this party, and some of these guys and girls were working at this tech company. I was in Christchurch at the time, in New Zealand, and we were talking about tech because I was involved in a software company at that time, and making a farming software and whatnot. So I was interested in the space, and a lot of people were saying to me down there that what they do in New Zealand and Australia, because your seasons are opposite to ours in North America, is they demo software in regions of New Zealand and Australia because they get the seasonality effect of it having, oh, let's try this in summer or let's try this in spring, that things are often, yes. So they try these things in Australia and New Zealand before. So I mean, just look at COVID too, same thing. You guys got a taste of that. You guys had, I think it was in, I don't know what province you're in, but I think it was in Victoria, where some of these policies were the worst in the world at that time. They tried them in Australia first, right? So I think you guys are seeing that now with the CBDC offer, is you're seeing the dry run of what's going to be offered here in maybe a couple years.
Yeah, honestly, everyone I've spoken to, it scares the absolute hell out of them because it's just such a slippery slope. And
I know.
Like you said, if they overregulate everything, they're just going to bring every sector to their knees, and you just have no choice but to comply. And,
well, no, yes, but I don't know. You sound like a fairly young man. I mean, I think Australia has the same opportunities that Canada does, especially in the legal sense. Almost, I have friends in Australia that literally do the same remedies that we do in Canada in Australia, almost to the article, because the Dominion system was set up much in the same way, and they boilerplate each other. But Australia is also a large landmass. Yes, a lot of it is inhabitable in the center of it, but I mean, I know truthers that are down in Australia that are farming out in, really rural areas, and they're not seeing any of this shit. So it just comes down to like where you want to put your efforts, and how much responsibility you're willing to take, and how much convenience you're willing to sacrifice in exchange for that freedom.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
These kinds of rural areas too, you'll find a lot of them are definitely national voters as well, which also does play a factor into it. So they're kind of, I wouldn't say in a bubble, because that's not what's happening, but it's like you see much less of what's happening when you're in these areas.
Oh yeah. I mean, it also comes down to what I've said for the longest time, is that the state is enforced at the highest levels, in the highest levels of population density. So, and that's just physically observable, in that when there's more infrastructure for the state around you and there's more bureaucrats within an arm's length, you're going to rub shoulders with bureaucrats. Whereas if you live in, some real rural part of, say, Tasmania in Australia, you know, you're going to see goats and sheep more often than you are other people, let alone politicians. So much of this stuff just has to do with your geolocation. And in most Western countries, the geolocation options are pretty good. Like even in the United States with 300 million plus people, there's still a lot of rural places in the US. I mean, Australia and Canada, massive rural opportunity in those countries.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So that's what I would say to that, brother.
Yeah, it's kind of up in the air, eh? Like everyone's a bit on edge about it, but we'll just have to see how it all plays out, I guess.
Yeah, and just, keep your options open, be prepared to make a change. Don't, I won't be going along with any of that shit. I
Like just insulating it at the moment.
Nice.
This housing here.
Oh, it's insane.
Like I think they said they were bringing in like 600,000 people a year, and there was like something like 300,000 houses being built.
600,000 people a year coming into Australia?
Yeah, intentional.
Yes. Exactly. Collapse the housing market, collapse every sector of the economy, collapse the agricultural sector, collapse the energy sector, collapse the manufacturing sector. I mean, the list goes on. Then it's going to be collapse the digital sector. That's going to be the cyber pandemic. That's going to be this cyber attack that they're going to blame on some boogeyman, right? Oh, Russia did a cyber attack. I mean, whatever it's going to be, they're going to collapse everything. These guys are just throwing shit at a wall to see what sticks, and a lot of it sticks. So they're just going all hands on deck. Let's just confuse the population. Like, go and listen to that clip of Obama. I shared it on Twitter yesterday. I think I just retweeted it because it's been around. It's been around for years, but he's sitting there talking about this exact same thing. He says, if you throw enough sewage into the public square, people aren't going to know what the hell's going on. And that's exactly the point. That's Cloward and Piven being fully realized. So, yeah, man, you're smart by getting mobile, and being able to just move your geography, because you could. I assume you're on the eastern side of Australia, as most people are. You could drive to Perth. You could drive on the whole other side of that country. It's a different world.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I would say to that, brother. Hey, I'm going to take one more call, and then I'm going to shut her down tonight. But I appreciate you calling in there, James. Right on, brother. Nice to hear from you.
You too, man. Have a good one.
You too. All right, we're going to do one more, folks, and we're going to bring in
Eric, the spiritual guy, at that spiritual guy. Eric, unmute your mic there, brother.
Here we go.
There we go. Oh, great, man. How are you?
Appreciate it. I appreciate all the hours of content that you put out. I didn't really necessarily have a specific question, but I've been following you for about 4 or 5 years through a couple of different iterations you've had there on YouTube, and listen to your content quite often. I've moved on. I just want to say thank you so much for all the content you put out and for the time that you take away from your family to give us the content online, and how close or how much breathing you get into and the relative amount of risk that you put yourself at, that you don't have to. You could have stuck straight to business and would have had very close to single success, I believe. But I really appreciate all the things that you have said against the powerful narratives that are given through all the airways. And that little bit extra bit of gravy has just gotten a ton of loyalty from me, and I'm sure so many of your listeners. And it feels so great to finish off this long stream and just say thank you.
Hey, man.
For all the work that you've done.
Right on.
All the distinctions you've made that have improved my life, and I'm sure all of your people who have come across your work. So thank you so much.
Hey, man. You're welcome. And I really appreciate you. Whoops, I just muted it. Yeah, you're welcome, man. And I really appreciate you saying that. And yeah, what a great note to end this double dipping stream and spaces tonight. So we're going to leave it there, folks. And yeah, let me know if you guys on YouTube aren't following me on Twitter. You should be, because I'm just way more engaged there. YouTube has just become difficult, and I'm shadow banned like crazy there. And the comments, I read people's comments. I'm reading them less though, to be honest. But the engagement isn't as rewarding as it is on Twitter. The thing that's so neat about Twitter is that somebody can comment, and I even saw it today in that thread I did about the EVs and the boondoggle that they are, just like seeing the absolute engagement. It's cool. It's cool, and I like conversations. I like ideas, and I like people sharing their thoughts. So hope to do more of that. And if you guys aren't on Twitter, follow me there. Do it at OffGridStone. You can follow me and chime into these spaces. And eventually, once the spaces here are doing video, I'm probably just going to move it all to spaces. But this seemed to work okay. I mean, we had a little bit of issues with some latency, but I probably would have had that if I was just streaming anyways. So yeah. So anyways, Eric, really appreciate you, man. And you're welcome. And we'll leave this here for tonight, folks. We'll see you in the next one.